meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing no one, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We're going to go to public comments and announcements, and Jeff, if you want to, oh, sorry, I was thinking that was your other meeting. Never mind. The next Select Board meeting will be held Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. And is there anyone in the audience for public comment and announcements?
Good evening, Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber of Commerce. Just a reminder, this Wednesday we have our 65th anniversary party for the Chamber of Commerce, and we are welcoming everyone to stop by between 11 and 2. Cupcakes, cake, and some goodies from Hot Stove.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy.
Lindy Dell, 32 Hillcrest Drive, Harwich, and I'm clerk to the Accessibility Rights Committee. And I'd like to briefly speak to the issue of people resigning from township committees. I've been very interested in your conversations over the past 2 meetings. Specifically, I'd like to refer to comments made in reference to the Harwich Accessibility Rights Committee, also known as HARC, that I feel are inaccurate. One, before that, it was suggested that committee charges need to be reviewed and redone, and that's probably a good thing. When HARC was reactivated in May of 1919, I'm aging myself, 2022, no charge was given to that group. If you look in the handbook for committees that was approved by this body, the Accessibility Rights Committee is not mentioned at all. It's not listed, and obviously there's no description or charge in that either. At the last meeting, I heard a lot of people resigned because they had nothing to do. I would take issue with that. HARC has been, at times, an active committee when it has enough people on it. I can refer you, if you look back, our liaison from your body gets the agenda and the minutes of every meeting. So I can, if you wish, I would send you copies of those agendas to everyone. In 2018, the HARC committee did a survey of the needs in this town to meet ADA standards. That was 5-6 years ago. There's still things in that list that have not been done. So as good as this town is, and I love being here, we are not done with accessibility rights, and we should not be done with accessibility rights. And that's looking to the past, that we still, an issue that has not been finished. And to the future, we should be looking now at affordable housing and looking at universal design for those units, so that when the units are constructed, they have not just accessible access to them, but within the unit itself, bathrooms of the right size to bring in a wheelchair. Counters of the right height. Grab bars where they would normally be needed. So the concept there is that when you build a unit, you build it for universal use. Because it's a lot cheaper to do it right up front than it is to go back and modify. So again, that's something, if you look on the agenda, that was on an agenda item for HARC. I've also heard that if you have concerns, to contact your select board liaison. I've done that more than once, and I did not get a response. And I did it as clerk to the committee, and I've done it as in a personal way. But, so that's just for you, food for thought, to consider that the volunteer committee people, we do it because we love this town. And we want to contribute to it. We want to make it better. It's our home. And so you think of your volunteers as your home repair and maintenance committee. that you know, that we will do what we can to improve, but there are times when we just need answers. Like, how can we go about this? What's the best path for me to contact other department heads if it's something that Public Works needs to do to complete? The committee had a whole bunch of questions like that we didn't get answered and would like to. So I strongly disagree that there's nothing to do. There's still a lot to do. And I appreciate you listening to this. And I hope it's food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I would just say that we do have a discussion on the committee later under new business, under item D, and we certainly do appreciate your time, and you're right. Volunteers on committees are really the way we're able to stay informed and function, and if you're having difficulty, you can certainly send the comments on to me, the chair, and I will distribute as well.
Madam Chair, could I ask for her name again, please?
Lindsay, wasn't it?
Was it Lindsay?
Lynn. Oh, Lynn, sorry.
Thank you, Lynn.
That was 32 Hillcrest.
Yes.
Valerie Bell, Cape Light Compact, and I'm just here to give you sort of an update on what's been going on. Currently, the big push these days is equity, and a lot of times in the past, home energy audits, people, getting their insulation done and buying an electric car and getting a heat pump was dependent on your income. You had to have the wherewithal to do all of that. Well, now we're switching gears, and Cape Light Compact has several programs specifically for moderate and low-income homeowners and renters. There are renter programs. So, for example, in moderate income, if an individual with an income between $45,000 and $60,000, they could get up to 100% of their weatherization and insulation and get a really good deal, up to 80% on installing whole house heat pumps. And then if you are actually low income by state standards, then you get the heat pumps for free, everything for free. So all the information is on the Cape Light Compact website. For anybody who doesn't have a computer or doesn't want to access it that way, you can always just give them a call. And they have There's actual human people at the end of the phones, and they do not live in India. They are actually right in South Yarmouth, and they will answer all of your questions, and they're really, really nice people. And the second program I'd like to bring to your attention is kind of interesting. It is the other group that kept getting left out of all of this energy efficiency were nonprofits. Things like churches and small agencies that, did really good work for the community, but never really had access to any of this. Well, now we have a nonprofit program. So if the nonprofit has to be on the Cape, you have to actually be a 501(c)(3). It has to be official. You can't have, your account can't exceed 1 million kilowatt hours for 12 months. Most agencies on the Cape don't exceed that. And there's an application right online, and I belong to the Harwich United Methodist Church. We applied, and our little church is getting insulation, light bulbs, all kinds of weatherization, and heat pumps for the whole church for $0. So there's a lot of programs out there, and I know sometimes it's hard to connect the people who need them to the program. So put it out to the universe. If you work with anybody that has access to these populations, help them out.
Great, and Val, do you have the phone number and the website to direct people to?
I do not have the phone. I can get it on my phone.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And, but thank you.
Thank you. Don?
Don't go anywhere. I'm just curious whether they have since addressed with something of an anomaly for the 501(c)(3)s. The theaters as a group were never able to qualify because it was self-regulating. If they didn't have enough money to cover a production because of the massive cost of the electricity for that, they'd pass on it and do something smaller. But to my knowledge, I mean, I'm involved with the Chatham Drama Guild, had been involved with the HJT, and I can't think of a theater around here that could qualify under the rules because of the continuous load that they were looking at.
Yeah, I would have, you would have to look at the actual electric bill over the 12 months and just see really how much did they use.
Most of them look like a mountain range.
Yeah,
Most of the
but
theaters.
1,500,000 kilowatts, I mean, that's a lot of electricity. But that's a good question, and I will take that back to the compact, and I will see,
That's what I was looking to do.
what they want to do. And thanks to Cindy, we now have a phone number. It's 508-375-6644.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ashley Symington, Director of Youth and Family Services. I have a few programs that are getting ready to run in a couple of months, but registration is open currently, so just looking to kind of let you know what's going on. The first one is going to be happening in April, and it's a collaboration between my department and several of the artists over at the 204. We're going to be running a program for high school students called Creative Collaboration, excuse me. So students will be able to choose between 3 projects and 3 different artists to work with. The professional artists that are working with us for this pilot are Mitzi Bramble, John Bonani, and David Criveno. Mitzi will be doing mask making, John's going to be doing poetry writing, and David is going to be doing a mixed media self-portrait. Thank you. Pilot program running in April, again, Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30. It is free. Registration is required. Folks can just kind of contact me if they want to sign up, and that one is geared towards students over at Monomoy High School. Yeah, the second program that we're getting ready to kick off is going to be similar to art and happening in May. This one's going to be for middle school students, building confidence through art. So it's a program for middle school students to come and just kind of build self-confidence through the act of creating art. I will be leading this one. Registration is required for it as well. Space is limited for it. We're going to be meeting over at the 204 on Thursdays in May from 4:30 to 6 p.m. And then the last one is a collaboration with the community center. Thank you to Carolyn and Reagan for helping me to put this together. We are going to be hosting a teen job fair for summer jobs. It's going to be on May 9th from 4 to 8 p.m. We really need some help getting the word out to businesses who hire teens. So to kind of come, we have lots of table space that's available and open to kind of anyone. We're particularly looking to target Lower Cape area because some of our teens don't drive and sometimes transportation's a challenge. But any jobs that hire teens, we are looking for participation from.
That's great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Emily?
Hi there, good evening. Emily Mitchell, Town Clerk. I just wanted to take a brief moment to report out from our presidential primary election last week, mostly as a vehicle to say quite a few thank yous. So as everyone here knows, an election is a monumental affair, particularly our state and federal elections, which include things like in-person early voting and vote by mail. We are so lucky in Harwich with our pool of election workers. I hear from so many of my peers in other communities that they struggle to find election workers to staff these different components of voting, and we just don't have that problem here in Harwich. In the last month, for the different components of the primary, we had 4 weeks of intensive vote-by-mail processing, 1 week of in-person early voting. We did 4 days of advanced processing of early ballots, 3 different trainings, and then of course a 17-hour election day itself. And during no part of that did I struggle to find folks who were willing and able to lend their time and their expertise to assist in that process. So in total, we had 37 different election workers who aided in those different roles. And I am just tremendously grateful to them for their willingness to answer my many, many calls and emails and requests, both in advance and at the last moment. So we are incredibly lucky. I do also want to thank the remainder of my staff, the town clerk's office staff, my assistant town clerk, Jen Clark, and executive assistant, Marissa Elsa Harawi. They have put in countless hours in the last months in preparation as well. And then our other town departments who make it possible, our Department of Public Works, Community Center, Police Department, and Harwich Channel in particular really lent to that success. So thank you to them. And a last thank you to voters, both voters who participated throughout that process and our town meeting voters who supported the purchase of new election equipment. This was the first election where we had new precinct tabulators, so the equipment that you actually put your ballot into when you're voting in person, and a new high-speed tabulator, which allows us to process all of those early ballots that come by mail much more efficiently. So thank you to the voters in Harwich for their support as well.
Great. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for all your hard work. You, your staff, and you did do countless hours, so thanks again. Anybody else for public comment?
You go ahead, ladies before gentlemen.
They might argue I'm a lady, but anyway. Oops, sorry. Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director, and I will have my April programs, but I wanted to let you know that we are very fortunate that we will be able to do another spaghetti dinner free for the public on April 5th. By the generosity of some wonderful people who are making contributions. So that will be on Friday, April 5th, and I wanted to announce it now because some people had asked last time if we could announce it a little earlier so they could make some plans. So 5:30 to 7 and at the community center. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolyn.
This is a little late, but my name's Frank Boyle. I wanted to make a public comment in regards to the Waterways Commission and the determination of who's going to be servicing the mooring fields. For the past 10 years, Chip has been working for the town, various capacities, to service the mooring field. He's done a terrific job. It's very difficult, dangerous work, and he's really risen to the occasion. Recently, there was a deadline that was missed by 9 days to renew his application to continue his work in Pleasant Bay. Round Cove, and Herring River. The harbor master I spoke to today said that, you know, a deadline's a deadline, and he had no interest in it, that it was done, finished, that the board had chosen, made a decision, and it's over. And I looked through the notes that got Chip to where he is now, which is out of the loop. There was a meeting with, that he wasn't invited to. His complete application was in the hands of the town prior to the Waterways Commission meeting. He wasn't invited to go there, although he's been working for the town for 10 years, to defend his position, apologize for being late, and in hopes of winning the bid. The bid, for people that don't know, is a 3-year bid. So not only is he out of work for this season upcoming, but for the next 2 years. When that Waterways Committee made their recommendation on a vote, which was unanimous, there's no discussion about Chip's prior commitment to the job. There's a review that goes on every year on how you're doing in the job to maintain that job. That issue was never brought up to the Waterways Commission, and a vote was taken, and it was presented to them. You can watch the video. There's a little missing part to it, but it's technical. But basically, there's no questions asked. There's a vote taken, and Chip's out at that point. And Chip doesn't even know this at this point. With that knowledge, John comes to you and says, here's the suggestions. They've all been vetted by the Waterways Commission. You get a vote on it, unanimous, done. And it just strikes me as not a good look for the town to have a dedicated employee that's been under review year in, year out, doing a dangerous job that also has impact on the environment. I've seen him out there in storms, raising boats. It's dangerous work. And I think that the town owes him a little more than just calling his application 9 days late and over and out.
So thank you for your comments. And no, go ahead if you have further.
Well, what I would suggest is that maybe the board sends it back to the Waterways Commission. Maybe there's an open dialogue. Maybe there's another vote before it comes to you again. 3 years is a long time to lose your income. I don't think anybody in this room could survive not having a paycheck for 3 years based on a 9-day technicality.
So I'm just going to point to the fact that we're going to have an update on this under the town administrator's report. We've all been inundated with emails, but there was a bid process, and as you know, there's a specific process that has to be adhered to. So that will be discussed, but it won't be discussed until under the town administrator's report because it's not on our.
I'm glad you're discussing it, and the only point I want to make is he never had the ability to defend himself. A deadline's a deadline, a process is a process. But if you've eliminated his ability to apologize for being late and make the case that he's had the job for 10 years and done a good job, then we're really not looking out for each other, are we? We're just using a technicality to put in a new regime. And that's my point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment and announcements?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just would like to remind the public, Select Board Member McCaskill and I will hold office hours this Wednesday at the Community Center, Room 3. Sorry, Carolyn, room 5. It's a nice little switch there for me, thanks. I liked room 3. Room 5 from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Urge all the residents and voters of Harwich to come out and share your thoughts with Select Board Member McCaskill and myself. And then I've also been asked by the fabulous Joyce McIntyre, the chair of our local planning committee, that there will be 2 opportunities for the public to attend what she calls, and the local planning committee calls, community visioning events. The first one will be held Saturday, March 23rd from 10 a.m. to noon at the 204 building. And the second one will be held April 6th from 1 to 3, which is a Saturday, April 6th, from 1 to 3 p.m. in the community center, and I will not pretend to know the room number. Thank you, multi-purpose room. And she promises snacks, coffee, and an interactive and exciting exchange. So please, it's the voters' opportunity and the residents' opportunity to be part of a process that is so important for our town in developing the next 10-year plan for what Harwich wants to be when it grows up. So please show if you can.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So hearing nobody else for public comment and announcements, we will go to our presentation, which is a project information update by Thomas Currier, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Project Manager for the Saquotucket Sidewalk Project.
So, Madam Chair, if I could, I would ask Tom and our DPW Director to come forward to the table here to present. As they come forward, I want to thank both Link and Tom. The snowstorm day, which we can say, because that may be mercifully the only one we had, both Tom and Link were able to take time out of their schedules to have a conversation. Tom has been very gracious to offer a project update. However, I promised Tom that I would mention in my introduction of Tom that he is updating us on our project. So this is the Town of Harwich project that we're partnering with Mass Department of Transportation on. So with that, I've given them ample time to get ready.
Right.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. Well,
Good evening.
nice to be here again. Always enjoy coming to Harwich.
If I may, 1 second, Madam Chair, sorry. I'd like to point out that this is done under what's called the Transportation Improvement Project. So we have many of those, geez, I think we have 4 in the works. This is one of those that's coming through fruition. And that program works where the town is responsible for engineering it to Mass DOT standards, the project, and once it's accepted in its entirety, Mass DOT then bids it, awards it, oversees, and sees it through its construction. So this is a very good way, an effective program to leverage limited resources to get a good bang for your dollar. We've got plenty of examples. I think the biggest one I've ever done was Route 137, done in 2012, where the town spent about $500,000 and got a $6 million project in exchange for that. With that, I'm sorry to steal your thunder there, Tom.
No, it's good, it's good. How do we activate the presentation?
I think we just hit the button.
Just hit the button. How simple could that be? Which button?
That one, yeah. You already did it, I think.
Oh.
No, you didn't.
I didn't do it. Which button?
I think you get a,
Top button? Oh, one of the left or right buttons. Oh, there it is, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're on the second one.
Yeah.
You
All
want the
right.
first one or the second one?
No,
Okay,
that's good.
I'm good.
So we're here to update you on the Route 28 sidewalk construction project from Saquotucket Harbor to Harwichport and Bank Street, basically. That's the project from Bank Street on the left to Saquotucket Harbor on the right end, the east end. What did we determine? It's a little over a mile, I think.
3,300 linear feet.
Oh, okay, so just under, two-thirds of a mile.
Who's counting?
Right. I think the cost is approximately $3 million, I think is the estimated cost right now in round numbers. The town is paying for the design, the town's the proponent, MassDOT owns Route 28. However, we're very grateful that the town is doing this. We think it's just a wonderful project. Because now you have a discontinuous, non-compliant sidewalk that lots of people would like to use. And the town, as the presentation indicates, slide please, Lynn. The town has a sizable investment in Saquotucket Harbor, and there's the Outer Cape Health Facility. Is that in the harbor area?
Yeah, it's
Across the
across the street.
Across the street, yeah. And so we have lack of pedestrian access from Harwichport to Saquotucket Harbor. People take their lives in their hands getting through that brook, the Cold Brook. There's that low point in the roadway that's also on a curve. It just like has a lot of bad elements to it in terms of pedestrian safety. So we're going to improve safety with the project. The improvements are a new 6-foot cement concrete and asphalt concrete sidewalk. Edge treatment is primarily granite curbing. We're making drainage upgrades, including some that we made a promise to try and improve the treatment of the runoff that the drainage system will capture. We made that promise to the Concom Commission a couple weeks ago, and I believe your designer has succeeded in finding some places where we can add infiltration chambers under the sidewalk where MassDOT prefers them to be, not in the roadway. And that'll help treat some flow that would otherwise go untreated out to Saquotucket Harbor. So hopefully we're going to fulfill that promise we made, and it's a little better of a project for that. So we're going across Cold Brook on Route 28 with a slight little moment slab structure that will support the sidewalk and reduce or limit the amount of impacts we have to that resource area, the natural resource, the brook and the brook embankment and so on. And that's how we're getting through there. It's also a steep slope, as you can understand, but that in very general terms is the proposed improvements. The status of the schedule is that we're almost ready to receive your final submission, which is a combined 100% / PS&E, which is an acronym for plan, spec, and estimate. That's the final package that basically represents what we put out to bid. We do a little buffing up. We add some contractual language to the specs, and we go through and check for consistency between the estimate and the plans and the specifications to make sure there are no issues there. We just kind of one final look, and then we put that out to bid. So we're almost there. Your designer, VHB, Steve Rhodes, has been doing an exemplary job. Not only is he a very pleasant person to work with, but he's also a really good engineer. And VHB has a long track record on the Cape and do great work. So all that's working very well. We hope to be in construction in the winter of 2024, 25. So we put it out to bid this August, and we'll identify a low bidder late fall and give them a notice to proceed, and they'll be able to get some preliminary work done and start, digging in earnest in the spring of 25, I suspect. It should take probably 18 months, I would think, 3 little construction seasons, if you will, as we have this summer moratorium, as I'm sure you're aware, especially in a town like Harwich. Everywhere on Cape Cod, actually. So they get spring of 25, fall of 25, and spring of 26. And with the winters we've been having, they'll be able to get a lot done. Maybe it'll go quicker. It's only a sidewalk. There's not a lot of deep excavation except for the drainage. But the drainage is very worthwhile, And that's what I have for you tonight. I know there's a lot of, I've been speaking with people before the meeting, and I know there's a lot of concern about the utility pole relocation. And because current MassDOT policy and federal policy is to move obstructions away from the edge of the roadway. So the poles currently fall next to the gutter line in the sidewalk. We want to move them to the back of the sidewalk, which we've proposed to do. And in every instance, we've tried our best to locate them such that they are least observable from the other side, from the property side. I think we've been very successful with that. I know there are probably a few folks who disagree. I'm sorry, but we're at final design. We can't redesign the whole, you can't move one pole without affecting the others, and not just the two adjacent, but it's a cascading effect. And it takes all the utility companies, including MassDOT's participation, to arrange where these things are going to end up. And we've done that, and we think they're in the best location possible. We're going to take every effort, every precaution to minimize the amount of tree trimming we have to do when we move these poles and the associated overhead wires with them. In most instances, we try to, wherever possible, we try to put the pole not in front of somebody's front door, but on the property line, dividing their property from their neighbor at the street layout line, if you will. So that's a kind of a T. We put the pole there. It's typically out of, the least visually obstructional type of location, if you will. I didn't say that very well, but anyway, we think that's a better place to put it than in front of somebody's, in the middle of their frontage. We try to put it to the edge of their frontage. And so that seems fairest for them and their neighbors, and so on. Sometimes this generates, I know at Snow Inn, we have generated a slight aerial easement over a couple of folks who live near the corner of Snow Inn and Route 28, because one pole that's moving to the back of sidewalk is moving slightly around the corner onto Snow Inn, that little radius that every street has. So it's moving, probably 10 feet back. It'll be on the back of the sidewalk heading down Snow Inn, just around the corner from 28. So from 28, from where it was before, it's moving back south, if you will, about 10 feet, which swings those wires over, and now they traverse aerially over the edge of someone's property in that area, which creates required aerial easement underneath. Now, aerial easements have no physical, it just buys the rights for the owner of the wire to park their truck on the street, Route 28, and get their bucket up underneath the wire to maintain it. So just to occupy that airspace up there whenever they need to do that, which isn't very often, I don't think. But that's the only issues I've heard about from where I work. I have been in contact with, several people along Route 28, specifically in that area, and I've tried to provide them the information that they asked for and explain why we're doing things the way we're doing them. Basically what I've said here tonight. And that's what I have. Can I answer any questions?
No, that's great. Thank you. Link, do you have anything you want to add before I go to board members?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. This project was initiated by the Board of Selectmen back in 2014, if you can believe that. 2014, with the recognition the town was going to be spending a boatload of money upgrading Saquotucket Harbor. We never got any real traction on this project until 2021. I've been in this game a long time. I have never seen DOT grant this type of a project. That means we have got exemptions from just about all aspects of the Complete Streets policy in which all of their projects are based upon. I mean, you got to go back to the footprint program, I think, like 25 years ago to see
We never
this.
build just one sidewalk.
That's my point, was this is about as minimalistic as one could be, getting some pedestrian connectivity from Bank Street down to the harbor. I really, again, I have to thank Pam Hasner, who has since retired. She was the, chief designer, planner at
She was the
District 5?
project development engineer in District 5, which
Yeah.
is all of Cape Cod, Bourne, and actually, it's the biggest district in the state.
They're out of Taunton, but Pam has just recently retired, and if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have this project.
She worked a miracle somehow.
She worked, yes, a real miracle to get exemptions from their own policies in order to do this sidewalk.
Oh, it's wonderful to have the idea that we're going to have safe trespass, the ability to pass safely, and the fact that we've got our upgraded harbor and a lot more activity, and then on top of that, a cultural district that connects, so we have ultimately the best of both worlds in that regard, never mind the speed which you've just identified, which is unusual.
I know it may not sound like a big deal to folks who aren't in the business, but believe me, the federal government doesn't let us build one. MassDOT's policy definitely wants 2 sidewalks and bike accommodation, but just to get this one little sidewalk in is fantastic.
No, that's good.
And it is the right approach in this stretch of Cape Cod on 28, definitely.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll go to board members. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Link knows this. I can go back to 2000 when I started serving, and this has been discussed forever. And I'm not going to trivialize anybody's objections, but I will say that the perfect is the enemy of the good. We have tried so long and so hard to do, especially the TIP projects that we were talking about through the years, have always dropped dead because of the requirements to change the character of the area. And we're leaving out the fact that there's a massive new medical facility there too, as well as the harbor. And looking back, the 25 years, I mean, you could have shot a cannon down the middle of Route 28 back then and not hit anybody in the winter. So that you've gotten this, I mean, I'm extremely grateful that you folks have worked with us to be able to get to this point. And I would encourage everybody to recognize what the destination is. It's not about their own agenda. It's really about the good of the town. And you folks have definitely bent an awful lot of rules to be able to get us to this point, so thank you.
Thanks very
Thank you,
much.
Don. Jeff?
I'd just say thank you for being here, and thanks for all your hard work, Link. And I have no questions.
Michael?
What Don said. Thank you for coming. Thanks for Sure, the
uh,
yeah, I always enjoy coming here.
Great, thanks a lot, I appreciate it. And Joe, did you have any other follow-up, or?
Just that we did receive communication from council for one of the neighbors on that project list. Board members should have that in front of you. However, you may recall that other than the cover letter, the materials in that were presented to you by a neighbor, I think back in late January. The director and I did meet with those neighbors in that area before I talked with Tom and the director on February 7th. So I think Tom's covered it very well this evening. We're aware of these objections. However, I think it's been well articulated, the benefit of the project overall.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the Select Board and the Financial Committee meeting minutes for March 2, 2024. And I move that we accept a gift in the amount of $200 for community programs at the community center donated by Harwich Women's Club.
Second for the Finance Committee.
Second? Okay. Any discussion? Don?
No.
Oh. Michael, do you have anything? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Now we have our public hearing.
Madam Chair, I don't believe I have, want me to just read it straight off of that?
Yeah,
Because I don't have the notice in this packet.
no, I didn't see it. Hi, Dan.
Do you have it, Joe? Thank you.
This stinks.
Of course.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Madam Chair, notice of public hearing, March 11th, 2024. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 8310 and Chapter 295 of the Code of the Town of Harwich, the Select Board acting as Town of Harwich Stormwater Authority will hold a public meeting on Monday, March 11th, 2024, no earlier than 6 p.m. in the Griffin Room at the Town Hall at 732 Main Street, Harwich, Mass. 02645. Down Cape Engineering as representative, Christopher Auer as applicant, and Mark Giarusso as owner, seek a local stormwater permit through application filed pursuant to the Town of Harwich Comprehensive Stormwater and Illicit Discharge Regulations for proposed 7-lot subdivision plan, Wildlife Circle, in quotes. The property is located off of Littlefield Pond Road, Assessors Map 65, Parcel R2-2/0. All abutters and other interested persons are invited to attend. For further information, please contact the Administration Office, 508-432-7531. Application package is for your review at the Harwich Town Government website.
Move
Thank
that we open the public hearing.
Yeah,
I move that we open the public hearing.
reopen it.
Reopen,
Yeah.
sorry, reopen the public hearing. Thank you.
Second.
You second that?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor? Jeff?
Aye.
Aye.
Michael?
Madam
say
Chair?
aye.
If I could very quickly, we're also joined by representatives from VHB Online. I believe Kelly Siri and Steve Rhodes are here. Kelly is going to be the lead for VHB.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dan Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Downkeep Engineering in Yarmouthport. I'm here with a stormwater permit, a selectman's permit. These are the permits which are required now by the state, and it's adopted locally. Many of the towns are doing them, but where you disturb over an acre of land is usually the trigger, or a subdivision. And here we're both. We're a small subdivision of land. This is in the southwest corner of town. We had done a preliminary subdivision a number of years ago now, a few years ago. Board of Health approved, and we moved through the planning board and then filed a definitive plan. That was approved last year, and one of the conditions is that we have a turtle sweep, work with NHESP to get the, there was some, not endangered species, but a species of special concern, which is a eastern box turtle out of the perimeter. So we've had Mike Ball of Marsh Matters Environmental sweep it, and we've set all the monuments around there, and we're going to maintain a silt fence around the project. Stormwater is pretty straightforward. We're collecting everything, deep sump-hooded catch basins to secondary, deep sump-hooded manholes, and discharging to 3 subsurface leach pits, which then would overflow to a natural no-fill drainage easement area on the west side of the site. Pleased to say this site has a lot of open space around it. There's a wildlife and conservancy area, so that the amount of impact is actually somewhat reduced, and there's some off-site large tracts which are being preserved in perpetuity too. Some of them are under the power line easement, but still valuable resource areas to not have horse corrals or anything else developed on them, and a good amount around the perimeter of the site here. I won't bore you with the details of how the stormwater permit, but suffice to say, you follow the subdivision rules and regulations, standard drainage calculations per the state stormwater guidelines. We follow your regulations. VHB did a nice job reviewing it. Kelly had early on picked up on additional manholes requirement. We had them review the application, I think about January 15th. They had about 10 points. We covered those, and then re-reviewed it a couple more times until we're here tonight. I think everything is satisfactory, meets all the rules and regulations, and I'd certainly be glad to go into any more detail if you need, but that's the summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I think we can go to VHB and let them provide any feedback. Is that Kelly?
Hi. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, like Dan said, we have completed our review, had some initial comments that Down Cape had addressed, and they're meeting all the stormwater permit requirements. So we're all set with the review. We don't have any other questions.
Great. So the additional manholes were added, and then how many lots is it, Dan?
It's 7 lots, but it's replacing at least 2 original ANR type lots, so net gain of maybe 5, but there's 7 total.
Total. Thank you. Any questions from board members? Michael?
The only thing I had was a comment from someone in the public today related to a bioretention basin, and the comments were that they turn into mosquito breeding grounds. And I remember the last stormwater permit that we permitted, that was a big part of the questioning, was who's going to maintain this? And I know on that last one, there was an association being formed, and the association would be responsible for it. So who's going to manage this after the fact and see to that it doesn't turn into a breeding ground for mosquitoes?
Right, so Mr. Auer will be the personal signatory that is transferable by a contract to a new buyer or owner. they would, that would then transfer to a homeowners association. It's a private road, so they would maintain the road and the drainage systems. There's an operations and maintenance plan in place that talks about that. In this particular design, there's very little risk of that because we've got upgradient infiltration prior to the natural area. So on most storms, not one drop will go into that low area. So it wouldn't become a pond typically. It would remain a dry, natural overflow area. So very little concern for mosquitoes on this particular site.
Perfect, thank you. Unrelated, Julie, just as a future topic, the request was that we take up having a third-party inspection
Right.
on some of these more open ones, and there was examples given, so,
Yeah,
thank you.
and
I
I-
have no further questions.
On that also, I had recently, in the last couple months, talked about, how we're tracking these for planning and et cetera, and it's being tracked by our new Community Development Director, Christine Flynn. Jeff?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Don?
Just to note that I get the mosquito problem, but we've been talking about this for years. I was on the planning board when we first started discussing this, swales versus basins. That's an ongoing problem because basins themselves aren't really a total solution. So I get the mosquito thing, but aesthetically particularly, doing it this way is like an advantage.
Yeah. The trick is to make them big enough and have them be pervious enough so they don't hold water. If they get construction silt in them, you can be in trouble because it'll gum up just like any other puddle on the side of the road or a muddy lot. The trick is to scarify that, get rid of it, overseed it, aerate it, and get it. Once the root systems are established, the wormholes are in, and you get a substantial 5 or so, 7% of the area that drains into it, you tend to have much less problems. The ones you see problems are undersized and they're over, you just get too much use and too much silt. So the trick is to make them big enough.
No other questions.
So back to, but to the point that came up in a previous hearing, once these lots are sold and then there's an association, it's really them who then has to take on the maintenance of them. And in a sense, I misspoke in the sense that Christine is aware of them, Christine Flynn, our Community Development Director, but we also have VHB who's monitoring them because we have several. So understood that, they're needed, they're better than not having them or having something more simple, right? So,
Yeah, low impact is a nice way to go. It's, if they're designed well, they tend to work very well. We have very pervious soils. The trouble is when they silt up, you just got to get rid of that silt layer. Yeah.
and the homeowners would want to do that anyway. They
It's
don't
in their
want
own
to go.
best interest, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they tend to be pretty low maintenance, but in a specific case, you can have issues. I don't want to demean any particular instance.
Right. Thank you.
If
Michael?
nobody from the public
Yeah,
wants
I'm
to-
going to ask the public, yeah. Anybody from the public would like to make any comments in regard to this?
I believe there may be someone online that was raising their hand.
Is someone online looking to make a comment?
I would move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Did we put a motion on the
Not
floor?
yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
I would,
All in favor
Can
of
we close
closing?
the first?
oh, thank you, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, who seconded?
Getting ahead of myself.
Both of us. Pick one.
Give it to
Two of them, yeah.
Thank you.
So moved and seconded, all in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
4-0. Okay,
I would move that we approve a stormwater permit application for 7-lot subdivision plan, Wildlife Circle, located off of Littlefield Pond Road, Assessors Map 65, parcel R2-2. That's it.
thank you.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate your time very much, thank you.
Have a good night. Now we'll go on to our 2024 annual town meeting list. Yeah, will you?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept, recommend, and place the following articles in the 2024 annual town meeting warrant. Annual departmental revolving funds authorization. Do you want that to be separate?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there.
Okay, so moved, what?
If I may,
Yeah.
sorry, was to accept, place, and recommend?
Yes.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Don?
You know where this is going, but I just want to say for the record, get it in the minutes, that I think that overall, we've increased our usage of revolving funds to the point where it's worth an examination about what could be put back in the budget and leave these for smaller things. So I won't be voting for it, but that's why.
Anybody else, any other comments? Okay, so moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Did
And I
you
would
vote?
move to accept,
So-
recommend.
That's opposed.
So
You
did
didn't, you didn't get to that point.
Do you oppose?
Yes.
I thought you said you were voting for it, sorry.
I
Oh, I
did
thought
too.
you said you were voting for it.
No, I'm not going to vote for it, is what I said.
Okay, so I
Alright,
missed
so-
the not.
So I'm going to move that we accept, recommend, and place the following articles in the 2024 annual town meeting warrant. Annual allocation for local cultural council grants, fund Cape Cod Community Center, Media Center, Cape Cod Community Media Center, transfer 172 Queen Anne Road for disposition, transfer 178 Queen Anne Road for disposition, transfer 246 Queen Anne Road for disposition.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now,
4-0, Madam Chair.
4-0,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Now, the fiscal year 2025 budget items, including, and the update and discussion on revenue sources available. I'm going to hand this to you, Joe, and then we can go to any specific questions board members may have.
If I may, before you go completely over to item B under the 2024 annual town meeting, I was hoping to just refer you back to the memo
right.
that I have in your packet. And if I could just, first of all, thank you for the placement of those articles. And I see that we have all 6. I also just want to put out there that, and if I could, I'll double check, but I believe the articles that you placed last week were simply placed. So as I go through, I'll make sure that those come back for recommendations as well. However, I have the record for the remaining articles here, and we'll have that updated. So as you can see in the memo that I presented to you last Friday, as of Friday, there were a potential for 46 articles that can be placed in this warrant as we go forward. And I think it may be helpful if I could go through the categories and how they're laid out. Again, this is in the memo for your reference. There's one article that's related to being an appropriation, 5 articles that relate to budgets, 6 articles that relate to capital, if that's the way you wish to proceed, 13 articles directly related to community preservation, as well as an additional article that is community preservation, but a correction. There are 9 customary articles, 7 of which you placed last week, the remaining 2 that you just placed tonight, as well as the 3 disposition of land that you placed tonight. There are potentially 3 articles relating to governance that I can get to in a moment. And as you know, there are the petitioned articles that you are required to place, but also just wanted to put out there, the game plan is for you folks to hear from the petitioners at your meeting on Tuesday, March 19th. Council did provide a Word version of that, so we can show to the petitioners to make sure we've captured their articles. So those will be in your packet. Those are expected to be distributed to the petitioners, the board, the bylaw charter review, and finance committees tomorrow, Tuesday, March 12th. With regard to potential articles, there are 3 others that I think will require further discussion and guidance from you folks. Those are listed in the memo as an article authorizing the use of funds from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund for wastewater. So if we're going to rely upon that source, there needs to be a standalone article. I do want to put out there on the record as soon as possible tonight and go forward that when we established the 2 special purpose stabilization funds at special town meeting in October of 2021, I made statements to the audience that these required a 2/3 majority vote for the funds to be voted out of special fund. Governor Healy had filed legislation which became law in the fall of 2023, reducing the quantum of vote from a 2/3 to a straight majority. So that was not anticipated when we established these. That would be the threshold that would be required of the article But again, I just want to put that out there because we did not expect that law to be, that bill to become law, and yet it is. Additionally, there is an article that is recommending a repurposing of a prior appropriating article, specifically repurposing Article 31 from the 2013 annual town meeting to supplement an appropriation under Article 12 of the 2019 annual town meeting. And that, of course, is the request that came to you through the Board of Library Trustees, and that's also included in your packet. So I can certainly craft these articles unless there's objection. And then the last one, I just wanted to make sure I captured it. I know the board has talked about a potential sewer assistance program. So if it's not going to be, say, in an operating budget, we may want to consider an article. So I did want to capture that. I'm aware of that one. And of course, that may require some direction and guidance from the select board.
Thank you, Joe. Michael?
The sewer assistance program, and I believe that was going on for the Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners to vote, and they have that line item in their budget.
Excellent.
So have we, maybe you can touch base with Dan or the commissioners, but that was a recommendation from at least one of their board members, and I would love to move forward regardless of that, with that program. But if we could clarify that, Joe, and absolutely get the language. The one that, the other one that I'm interested in, and I've asked that this be put on the agenda, is for the sale of the Queen Anne Road property that we got $1.5 million and $1, that we put that into a fund for land acquisition. And we haven't voted that as a board yet because it hasn't been on the agenda. But it would be a shame to miss that for town meeting. And I do know in tonight's packet, there's a recommendation for a capital item, and moving that forward. I think there's 2 or 3 more years left on that capital request. But in my mind, it'd be an absolute shame to take a piece of land and sell it, and take it from all of the voters and all of the taxpayers and then use it to fix a building, and that we should continue our capital plan expenditures. The article, Joe, the way I envision it, would be for any other costs associated with as well. And I know our attorneys can figure that article out. But we've been kicking the can down the road on owners unknown and miscellaneous parcels for as long as time. And it's about a $3 million liability to the town. We've also got a lot of residents that are complaining about subdivisions being built in areas that they thought were owners unknown, and that's only because we're giving other people the opportunity to clear these rather than purchase them ourselves and use some of those lots for affordable housing, open space, wastewater credits, future wastewater, pump stations, any number of things. Real estate and open space was before us, and we unanimously voted to support 3 areas of town that they wanted to focus on and were prioritized. A couple of those lots are over 30 acres. There's a lot of land, and we need money to get it. Judah Eldridge, I believe it cost us about $800,000 to get to where we needed to get to on that. We just missed a lot out behind the movie theater in Harwich. We could have bought what's going to be another development of $2 million homes, and we just missed that one because we didn't have the money to do it. So I would strongly encourage the chair to put this on the agenda for next week for a board vote on whether they want to proceed with this or not.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. 'Cause
I understand the member's position. I think you'll also have an opportunity under the funding discussion for budgets to also cover that. So you could get into that issue tonight because it relates presently to the capital plan, but I think you would be well within your rights to give any guidance on that, and if necessary, vote an article next week for some other purpose.
Thank you.
And then if I could, back to the memorandum. The last item is sort of an inside baseball thing, but it's critical. You folks had talked before about article placement. So right now, purposely, there are no article numbers associated with any of the articles. I can tell you that, a lot of the customary and budget, like we've always looked at Article 4 for the operating budget and other expenditures, but through the memorandum, I would ask the board to give some guidance on specifically where you would want articles to fall. It doesn't need to be tonight, but as we get to finish the warrant, we would need a numbering and a placement sequence for the articles.
Well, I think now is a good time to talk about that, so we talked about trying to get the petition articles in the front end of the meeting so that we're not dealing with them at the late hours and only a few people there. So I don't know if we want to sort of couple, sorry, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say exactly that, is I urge you to consider, it doesn't have to be like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But I would urge you to consider that almost all of these things have some sort of impact on everybody, even though not everybody is opining on them. I mean, some of them come off as punitive to some people. So that plus an education of the public that if you get something, and you get your opinion across, and you go and leave, the rest of the night, it's still possible to reconsider something. So I think it's really important. This isn't about me saying that they should all be voted down, but it's definitely about me saying there shouldn't be 100 people doing it. Town meeting was supposed to reflect the will of the town, and we were kind of subverting that recently because of the second night having, very strongly just zoning and petition articles.
Right.
So I get that you don't want to group them all together, but maybe you can prioritize within the 4 or 5 of them which ones you would consider to be the most impactful on everybody and put them closer to, the middle of the top 10.
Board members, Jeff?
Just have a question on Ed McManus's petition article. That one doesn't seem to be controversial. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, the attainable housing, yeah.
I actually had urged him to put it in, and it not only is not controversial, but it opens up something that we know that we've been talking about for, 5, 10 years, about the fact that we're dealing with affordable, like you heard what the numbers were when Val talked about affordable. That's really low. That's not even the issue anymore. The issue is we can't get anything, south. We can't do anything north of 100% right now of area median income. So his is actually a pretty straight up. The governor has talked about changing that to attainable. And all we really need to do is ask, to file special legislation to let us get in on that. It'll open up things for a lot of different types of projects that aren't currently possible.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for that. I was just simply trying to understand whether or not that one, out of the 5, would be a very quick.
Right.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So, as this being my first annual town meeting, I would lean on the 3 of you to give some guidance to me as to how you see placement happening. But if that's a layup, that's an easy one that's not going to have the back and the forth of multiple people.
Right.
Say we get it out of the way right away.
Although sometimes I would caution you, the history of the town meeting is the smaller the issue, the bigger the discussion.
Well, no crystal ball for sure, but I think the point being is that one out of the 5 shouldn't take a lot of time.
Michael?
And to all of your points, I would argue that article should be right before the last article, which is the herring fishery one.
Of the night.
Because that's not something that's gonna be heavily debated.
Okay.
And then it's the fertilizer ban, the cutting of the trees, which is 15 pages. Some of these other petition articles, pesticides, they led to long debates. Now, they've all been defeated in the past, but they did lead to some long debates. So I, Julie, would say that Articles 1 through 8 we should leave alone. Those are the financial ones. Those are the ones that should draw the most debate that don't.
Right.
And then I would sprinkle the petition articles in by complexity, I think, towards the beginning of that meeting, and then maybe break them up with the CPC articles.
Yeah, like maybe say, without looking at the list yet, but like maybe through 10 through 20 or 10 through 25 or something.
So the idea is to make sure we get it in the first night.
Yeah.
And closer to the beginning of
When
the middle.
everybody's there.
Right.
Middle of the first night. So to your point, Select Board Member McCaskill.
I'd love to see a proposal next week from Joe with a little bit of guidance that we just gave him.
That's right, yeah.
I totally agree with you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
And again, the goal is to have the petitioners come before you on their 5 articles And we can also have language if you want to then make changes to the sequencing.
Right,
But I think the guidance is clear,
Yep.
and I like the fact that I can do sprinkling.
sprinkling, right.
I appreciate that.
Now, where are we?
So then if I could, the next item would be item B, and that's all of the, or most of the financial matters that will come before town meeting. And to the earlier guidance on the budget, the reason why those articles haven't come before you yet is to have these discussions on the enhancement of services and anything else that may impact. But as soon as we get closure on those, the articles are essentially written, and it would just be a quick edit to update any actions that you may take tonight. But to item B, under 2024 Annual Town Meeting, you can first have a discussion, if you prefer, on revenue sources that are available. And again, this may go back to an earlier comment by a member, or the next topic under capital outlay. In any event, if you look at the memorandum that's in your packet, I have materials that relate to revenue sources that are available, capital outlay budget funding items with emphasis on funding sources, potential changes to the fiscal year 2025 to 29 capital outlay plan, and then, of course, as you've requested, there's more material presented for you to have discussions this evening on the various enhancement of services that were talked about at your budget workshop. So, Madam Chair, members, I can go through each section of the memo or defer to you folks on how you want to proceed. But within that memo, you can see that there's a section on sources and uses, capital outlay plan and budget, and enhancement of services.
I think it's helpful to have Joe go through it if you all do. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
So first, with regard to available sources, and again, some of this may change just because of the timing of everything, but in that section of the memo, you can see that there's an updated sources and uses. Again, that's a way of really getting to revenue and expenses. I think as you look through that, I'd go back to my notes real quick, that as you look at the sources and uses and then the following draft Appendix B, which is always in support of what we will now understand to be Article 4, operating budget and regular expenses, I did, after a conversation, add a line within administration. Let me just find that for you. Under, if you look at page 1 of Appendix B, you can see on line 30, administration expenses. That line item has gone up by $250,000, and that's to facilitate a discussion amongst the board to make sure we continue supporting the child care stipend program. As you may all recall, I think it enjoyed great success at town meeting, and I know that we've had great success with the program. And as I mentioned in my budget message on February 5th, the intent of my budget was to make sure we continued the programming that folks were used to or expected from last year's budget to this year, because otherwise we'd be cutting. And I do want to emphasize that that would get to childcare stipend, but also to the ongoing, what's been loosely referred to by me and staff as the Owners Unknown project. So both of those, I would argue, are existing programs, and so certainly a discussion on funding them is warranted tonight and as we go forward.
Thank you,
I'll
Joe.
pause there for a second.
Yeah,
Just a question, Joe, on the Owners Unknown one. I see the 250,000 for a child's stipend. Did you put a number on the Owners Unknown or not yet?
I did not yet, because for me, first of all, if you want to assign it to a department,
Okay.
we can certainly do that. If you want to do it as an appropriating article, and as we discussed the funding source, we could do it that way. But I really wanted to leave that to the board. Really, my emphasis tonight is, I think it is correct to say that where I was trying to create a budget back for you folks on February 5th, that did not cut programs. Those were two critical program areas that the board wanted to support, and I believe still support, so we want to make sure we capture that.
thank you. Any other questions on that, Michael?
Not on that part, no. Not on where he's at so far.
Okay. Jeff?
Nope.
Don?
Nope.
Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
Then, within the packet, after the four-page draft Appendix B, you can see that, and I think based on the guidance, this will probably appear next week as Article 5, the Monomoy Regional School District budget. Again, that number is what was presented by the school district to staff and affirmed when they met with you the last meeting in February. We also understand, I think there's a meeting of the Regional School Committee this Thursday, so that if that number changes, that change will be reflected in the draft article.
And if it changes, it was only going to go decrease. They indicated to us that it wasn't.
That was my recollection as well, absolutely. And then the next one is related to the Cape Cod Regional Technical School District budget. First, I will tell you that I need to embolden the line that says assessment for Town of Harwich, as we've done for Monomoy. And again, that number was presented back in January. I had a conversation with Superintendent Sanborn on Wednesday of last week, and they do not anticipate that number changing unless they hear, as we're interested as well, in the local aid numbers that are coming out of the state budget discussions. So if those hold, you'll see them next week as Articles 5 and 6.
Oh, Don?
This is one of the, I know we're not, it's awful late in the cycle this year, but it seems like there are certain things that just wind up being late every year, and we never have the discussion we say we wanted to have. And just want to bring up that at some point, Dr. Sanborn, that we have the discussion that we've been having about who pays for the resource officers there. And that really needs to happen because unlike the rest of the formula distribution where all the students get the same basic services and everything, it doesn't matter where you live, we come with an extra burden of having to provide the resource officers for everybody.
Yeah,
So-
that's a conversation.
We have to have it at some point. We can't just say we'll do it next year.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may, if you watch maybe you already have the Finance Committee's discussion with the Cape Cod Tech, the resource officer came up, and they were actually talking about increasing the cost of the resource and then spreading it out over. So it might not be a bad idea to go and look at that meeting.
There's a certain imprimatur that.
Yeah, no, I
when
understand.
we say it as opposed to the Finance Committee to them,
get it.
and they need to know we're serious about it.
At least the conversation's beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
If the board likes, I can reach out to Superintendent Sanborn to see if he can present to you either next Tuesday or the following week, whatever the
Yeah.
pleasure of the board is.
That's fine. I mean, if he has time, I think it's a conversation worth having. And so those will be 5 and 6 as long as, once you have those numbers, we should have those next week for our agenda on the Tuesday, the 19th.
That's correct, and I can also, I can essentially finish or include all of the articles, depending upon how deep you get into your revenue discussions tonight with any number of topics that you've mentioned thus far, and I think that's a pretty good segue to then get to the discussion on capital outlay budget. So again, I think you know that we've held off on this topic after the December 4th joint meeting, as is required by charter. I've met with staff and any of the departments impacted. So what you have in your packet tonight is a suggestion, and I know the finance director is here as well and can also weigh in on this conversation, but on that page in the packet, you'll see the expectation of how we could fund 2.4 million of the roughly 11.1 million in the capital plan, and those would come from dedicated funds as we typically do year in and year out. Then there is the use of free cash, as we've used in past years for certain items in the capital plan, and again, that would impact potentially on facilities maintenance, fire department, Harwich Elementary School, information technology, police department, and public works department. That gets to 2.9 million, which I think is pretty close to depleting, if not fully depleting, the available free cash. Again, for my purposes, this is an item that can be discussed greatly. In fact, I apologize, I misspoke. Embedded in the first category is the 1.51 million, so I don't want to suggest that that's guaranteed. So let me just highlight, under the first section of capital projects and potential funding sources, facilities maintenance has two potential funding sources. The sale of land receipts reserved appropriation that we've talked about before, as well as the remainder for free cash. That's not a recommendation per se, it's meant to be a discussion point. And as we said earlier, we can certainly get into that. Before we do that, however, to then balance the capital outlay budget, as we would call it, for fiscal year '25, we then have three other items that require borrowing articles. So that would be 2.5 million related to the Gulf's irrigation project, 1.5 million, which is really related to Chapter 90 funds for the Public Works Department, and there are funds related to the Water Department that they were looking to take out of retained earnings. Now, in talking to each of those department heads and knowing that I believe all three of those require additional articles, we have not had a substantive discussion beyond your budget message on whether or not we're going to do overrides or debt exclusions. So I did ask if these projects were held out for a potential future discussion. If there is a special in November, was that possible? They indicated it was. And that is how you would get to balance the capital outlay budget for fiscal year '25. As I've said before, you know, we know that the free cash was impacted by receivables that have been, that were available at the time. We may imagine that there might be a higher number, whatever higher is for a relative term, in November, but otherwise, without funding sources, I would certainly come back to you to recommend cutting the capital outlay budget per se. We're not going to spend money we don't have. So a lot of narrative, but that's meant to stimulate discussion amongst the four of you right now.
Yeah, so we might as well talk about the different capital outlay items, and does anyone want to start?
If he doesn't want to start, I'll start. It's flagged as facilities maintenance, and to Michael's point, I don't want to encumber that with that, me personally, and I don't know how everybody else on the board feels, because that's realized proceeds from the sale of property. And you're shooting ourselves in the foot, because then we have absolutely no ability to do what Michael was saying in terms of looking around. That was a year ago. The Real Estate and Open Space came to us and said, we've got this plan that some of it can be open space, some of it can be used for housing. There's no way to fund it otherwise.
Jeff?
That was, two questions. The Brooks Library, the past work was funded by an annual, Brooks Academy, was funded in the past work was funded by?
A borrowing.
Correct. That's where I think it should sit. I'm with Don and Michael on this one. I don't think we should use the proceeds of the sale of that land to fund Brooks Academy's work.
Can I ask what the answer was to your question about the funding?
Annual town meeting appropriation, I believe.
The original one was a borrowing for capital improvements.
Okay, so I'll get the answer from Joe, just so I hear it straight. How was the Brooks Academy past work funded?
I thought it was CPC.
CPC, but not all of everything that's been done there has been done that way.
I can't hear the responses.
Not everything through the years that's been done there has been done through CPC, but it was,
Correct,
this
right.
last cycle was.
The sale, I believe, of 5 Bell's Neck, we analyzed that those funds were used to support supplemental funding.
Okay.
Michael?
Because of overages once we got started.
Absolutely,
Okay.
correct, no doubt.
That was my next point.
Yeah.
Those were overages, if I remember right.
Right.
And I just, I've already said what I had to say on that. I would just say that it would be great if we could look at an article and vote an article. If we're selling land and we have this tax problem related to land, and we have a committee that has done an amazing amount of work and is currently helping our assessor on a level that we're not hiring for in identifying properties that they already know of and know who owns them, I believe it to be a slap in their face if we don't move forward with this. And 1.5 million is not going to touch what we have to do. But as we acquire, and if these other 3 properties are allowed to be sold, we might actually make a real difference. And it has previously been stated that we can't use the funds for this. And I will defer to you, Joe, and I know you sent me, or I got from you, I've saved it on the screen. Administration of the Government, Title 7, Chapter 44, Section 63. Land is specifically mentioned in there. I talked to one municipal lawyer today and went through that, and then I called our senior counsel, John Giorgio, and he said that he sees no problem with what we're attempting to do. And he would be writing the article, so.
Could I ask your reference, you had said at the top of your screen?
Yep. Oh, no, not in the packet. I copied what you gave me.
So is that Chapter 44, Section 63?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, yep. So if I may, that, we have a handy-dandy guide called Overview of Statutory Treatment of Municipal Revenues, given by DLS, and they've identified sale of real estate proceeds, which is a receipts reserve governed by Chapter 44, Section 63. I'm not in any way, shape, or form arguing with council, and I agree with what the member said. I will rely greatly on council to develop the article if that was the will of the board. And then if I may, as you have your discussion, there can absolutely be an article on the 19th. I would ask for guidance relative to the capital plan, just so we can, start to assemble that as well, if you have that tonight.
Okay. Jeff?
Just another question. So I feel this is a good strategy for a long-term great outcome for this town. What do we do with the capital outlay budget with the facilities maintenance line? Do we just take facility maintenance out, and if the pleasure of the board is to put in real estate and open space, Michael law, is that what we put in there? What do we replace that with, and then where does facilities maintenance go?
So, go ahead, Don.
It's too late for CPC.
Right, this is why I'm asking the question, because clearly there needs to be a facilities maintenance.
Yeah, but we said up front, correct me if I'm wrong, we said up front it was our desire as a group to not necessarily tackle everything here and go defer some of these things at a fall town meeting. I'm not sure that we need to actually tackle this second, but we do need to stop it from being headlined as being a capital improvement or something.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, so I think the general consensus is that we're not going to go forward with the 1515 for facilities, right? And that we'd like to see it come back as an article to fund owners unknown research.
That would be my feeling.
Just making sure I'm getting it clear.
And just to the last question, Jeff.
Yes.
1.160 million of this facilities number as it exists right now is related to Brooks Academy.
That's right.
So we're only taking offline something that really wasn't online, because the description is compiling projects that was previously stretched out across FY '24 through FY '27.
Yes.
So it's only an ask to bring things forward.
Right.
So it's not as though we're kneecapping facilities. And we did, to the earlier point, come up with extra money from sale of buildings last year to go their overages, and I believe we spent almost $2 million in the past 2 years on that building.
Yeah.
And that, a lot of this is future work.
Mhm.
And maybe it belongs in the future and give the taxpayers a slight break on
Right.
that building for a bit.
Don?
And just to come right back to the beginning of the discussion again, this money is not going to be available under the capital plan because the source that we derived it from is going to be devoted to something entirely different than what this plan contemplates.
Right, that's what we're saying, is that we're going to take it.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that you got to take both out, not just the description, but the available funding is going to be encumbered by some other act, not by this.
Right. So, I'm sorry, Michael, did you
No, I
want
was
to say
just gonna
something
go
else?
back to Joe's original ask was the guidance on,
Right.
facility. We answered one piece of it at least.
And if I may respond to the earlier questions as well, or to build on what the members have said, and I thank the member. I have the application in front of me relative to the Brooks Academy Museum part of it. And if memory serves correctly, and I apologize, I thought I had the plan in here as well. So that was the shuffling of papers. But I believe the facilities maintenance capital budget for fiscal year '25 was in excess of $2 million. So if you add up the line that says the 1.51 and the 842, that would get to the total of the facilities maintenance capital budget for fiscal year '25. As was said, $1,160,000 of which is specifically for that one building, Brooks Academy Museum. So if I take out the 1.5 from that, whatever's left over and what other funding sources I have, I can put into that budget. I also want to put out there, for the board's benefit, that the money that we still have available for Brooks Academy Museum, we're currently seeking architectural services and reports. Meaning, if we do not go forward on the Brooks Academy Museum part of that for May 6, 2024, we may have information that can influence decisions in November of 2024 or May of 2025.
Right.
And so it's just a reconfiguring of all the different asks, if that makes sense.
And potentially more money with a new certified free cash, correct?
Correct, right.
Yeah.
So if anyone, if I may, if anyone were distressed by the fact that we can't necessarily fund that in the short term, I would refer everyone back to my budget message to be a parrot of caution and deliberate action, and this is one of those items. So if need be, we'll take it out, we'll reconfigure it, and we'll come back to you. However, just remember that the entire number that we're trying to fund is 11.1 million. So if we knock out some or all of facilities maintenance for '25, you know, we've gone down to a number probably just south of 9 million. Again, we have funds available from free cash for other projects, other funding sources, and we may be able to hold off on those 3 other big-ticket items.
I think that's a nice, solid, long-term plan.
Yeah, I think so too. Any other comments? So,
From a different area, possibly,
what?
relating to a different area of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure that we can resolve this tonight, but we got the golf irrigation listed as $2.5 million for golf as a borrowing. I'm just curious, because Roman kind of opened my eyes with this. Apparently, the money from the fees was not going into a revolving fund except for the pro shop. So I guess my question is, because it never has come up during the entire time that I've served, about the policy of, okay, we generate these revenues, and where does it go? What part of it goes to operating? What part of it goes to capital? I mean, does anybody have an idea of what's in that fund right now that was set aside specifically over the years for capital improvements?
Kathleen.
And Madam Chair, if I could, while the finance director is coming forward, specifically for the 2.5 million for the irrigation project, there is a distinct, separate from revolving fund, receipts reserve fund.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
That gets to golf. So the golf improvement fund is not one of the 2 revolving funds. It's a receipts reserve fund And of course, I'll find in a moment the specific statutory reference, because it talks about ambulances, something else, and golf. And of course, we always relate ambulances and golf.
No, we agree. That's what I'm saying. is I was under the impression that the revolving fund is where it went, and it isn't.
Right.
It's actually in direct receipts somewhere.
That's right.
And it was aggregating, and it was a policy of this body, not during the time I've been serving on it, but somebody made the decision about what the allocation was when it came in, about where it was going to go. I'm just curious that, is this fully borrowed, or is this going to be augmented by something that we have in a bucket somewhere?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Roman said that his receipts fund the payback of this wholly.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear.
That's
though.
what you want to hear.
I'm not, he sends it off. I just want to make sure that on the financial end,
Sure.
that that's exactly what's
Yeah,
going on.
right.
That it's underwritten by that.
Oh,
Oh, Joe?
If I may, just before we get into the specifics of the fund itself, so I did find the reference. It is under Chapter 40, Section 5F, and it is a special purpose fund held over from year to year, and it refers to ambulance receipts reserved, beach and pool receipts reserved, golf course receipts reserved, and it goes on to list others. So that's the statutory reference. And the capital item itself would require a debt exclusion question. So if we are doing that, we want to have something that comes at town meeting for the voters to approve the appropriation and for the debt to be excluded. It would then potentially become a ballot question on the May 21st, 2024 town election, or to be held off. Beyond that, the ask for the town is not the 2.5 million up front, of course. That would become a debt. That would be perhaps a bond note as well, that we would use that fund specifically to pay the debt service for that portion of debt.
And that's the bottom line. I'm just not certain that I've ever had an answer to what's in that fund.
Kathleen?
Hi, Kathleen Barrett, Finance Director. Without going through and actually running quite a bit of reports and holding up the whole process, my understanding in talking with Roman about the borrowing was going to be, he had some funds that he'd been building up that he'd been setting aside for capital, but obviously it's far more than they would have in their funds. But the intention of the golf borrowing was to be funded by golf receipts. So given that, it wouldn't actually, it was my understanding, it wasn't going to be exempt debt because it's going to be funded solely by golf.
By there, okay.
I mean, if that was the
that was
choice,
right.
I'm not, we're still doing a lot of work with the borrowing, and there was some back and forth on it, so I wouldn't want to say definitively, but that was my understanding back when we had the original discussion. If something has changed, be happy to.
Just at some point, I'd like to know what's in that fund.
There's 3 funds, so we can give you the
Yeah, okay.
the outline of all of
No,
them.
it doesn't have to be tonight, I just would like to know.
Joe?
This is one of 3 topics that, if there is a related ballot question, in deference to our town clerk and everything that's going on, there may be at least 3 questions that would have to be added to the warrant for May. I'm not presently recommending that. I'm recommending we hold off, and I've confirmed with those departments that they affirm that we can hold off on those projects. There is a 4th one that I've asked the Monomoy School District to present to you next week, and that is a presumed debt exclusion that Chatham's also considering. You may recall the superintendent making reference to the middle school project. So for me, I do have angst and concern that we'd be rushing to get these ballot questions, the warrant article items and the ballot questions together for May. So again, going back to the one-pager on funds available for capital, I would recommend that we hold off on those 3. But that's a decision for the board to make one way or the other.
Thank you, Joe. I think that if we're trying to give Joe as much direction as we can tonight, I would be in favor of holding off on those, but I'm looking to other board members for their comments. Jeff?
Well, if the department heads feel that they can hold off,
Right.
that satisfies me.
Michael?
I would agree with Jeff.
Don?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Joe was saying, it's not just the articles. She'd have to get the ballot initiatives on time to put them on the ballot, which is an awful lot of things to do in between, well, the other things she's doing right now.
So there's some more direction. Joe.
Yeah, and if I can just, give me a second, sorry. If I can just state it expressly, I understand I have guidance and support to hold off on the 3 capital items that are for the golf department for 2.5 million, the 1.5 million in the short term for Public Works, and the 1.75 million for Water Department, because I have confirmed with those 3 departments that if we can revisit it in the fall, that is acceptable to them.
Right. And next item.
And then if I could, I did hear, I thought I heard every member say, but it would be helpful to understand that the sale of land receipts reserved for the sale of 276 Queen Anne will not be a source available for the capital plan for fiscal year '25.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then discussion on proposed enhancement of service request relative to departmental operating budgets for fiscal year.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You read my mind and my memo. I appreciate that. So yes, on the 2-page memo, that's the last section, enhancement of service requests. So what you have in your packet is a spreadsheet that I created to just articulate the sum total of all of the requests. And so very quickly, if you go through that, and it's after the title page of enhancements of service requests. So whether it was a salary and wages line or an expense line, the total requests that were asked come to $766,176. So I'll state that number again, $766,176. And they relate to the potential for 5.5 full-time equivalent, so 5.5 full-time equivalent positions that would be added. However, I also want to note that the earlier conversation about $48,000 that appeared in the expense line for treasurer, I believe is not an enhancement of service. Looking for our finance, sorry, Frank. Say again? Thank you. It was removed from the operating budget. So that's not in consideration. And then right after that, the Department 155, Information Technology. I have placed that in the IT expense line for discussion, but also because I think it was incorrectly characterized as an enhancement of services. That $13,125 is a continuation of our information technology build, and it was meant to be the next step, and this will allow for email identities to be created for all boards and committees, which is going to help several departments, not the least of which is IT, and we hope the clerk's office and administration, because those would be the official identities assigned to committees. So truly, if you break it down that way, I would argue that the $13,125 meets the definition of ongoing programming, but I wanted to make that aware for the board to either affirm or reject that thought. And if you do, then you look at the EOSs in the amount of $766,176, the narratives, and all of the information that's in your packet.
Thank you, Joe. Any discussion on any particular enhancement of service items? Don?
I see we still have in here something we haven't really fully discussed, the Office of the Cemetery Administrator.
Oh, from when we talked about that on Saturday,
Yeah, but we haven't actually come to a conclusion on it. It's in here
right,
as an enhancement.
right. So that's why we're going to talk about what we think on the EOSs, because, right, I mean, if this is the time to figure out if there's a better way to do it, or, because to your point, we talked about this part-time person for cemetery, and then there was also the highway DPW person, but that's got 2. So was there a way to work with Robin and the other person, I'm blanking on the person's name, that replaced the other girl. Because if Robin can work with her, then we were talking about whether or not another half person is needed.
That's kind of what I was doing, is seeking guidance about, from the town administrator about what he sees as the ability to be able to
Combine
aggregate hours, from somebody else to assist her.
Right. So I'll look to you.
So
Joe.
I will just state again that I'm not recommending any of the enhancement of service requests to be consistent with my budget message going back to February 5th. However, as you engage in conversation tonight, I can certainly give you thoughts and opinions or direction on any of them. Specifically to a part-time executive assistant for cemetery, the chair is correct in your recollection. We had a staff member retire. We have a new staff member come on board. None of that, for me, changes the directive to my Public Works Director and my cemetery administrator for them to partner to make sure there's coverage. Specifically to executive assistants, my philosophy remains that it may be better to establish several shared executive assistants for any number of the single-person department heads. That's not a replacement for a clinician in the Youth and Family Services, but it does further the organization. However, if you did not fund any of these, there are several of these that we could still find a way to offer some solutions in the short term.
Thank you, Joe. Board members? Jeff?
So again, questions from me. I'm looking at this as new hires present a greater impact on the town than would be, say, building enhancements for the community center. Is that a fair statement for me to make?
I think so, yeah.
Same thing with the fire department asking for overtime, available funds for overtime. That's less impactful long-term on the town versus new hires. Is that a fair statement? Yeah?
I think so.
So then, should we have the conversation about those two specifically first?
I don't have a problem with going in that direction, but I will say that, there's a couple things here in terms of people in new positions that we did talk at length about over the course of the year. So I
Sure.
would say, to me, the top item would be the HR position. I would say that currently Rec and Youth and all the expansion of programs that's being demanded by, parents, et cetera, so we should look hard at that. And then we heard from Ashley in terms of why she needed another youth and family, under youth and family, the clinician. And although I certainly don't disagree with that, she does an awful lot. But we've also had a conversation, and again, not to drag Ashley into this, but looking at that position overall in the schools and the larger conversation we need to have there. So,
If I may on that one, and I support Ashley's interest in having another support person for her, but she also did make it clear that she does not have a waiting list at this point.
Right.
So maybe this is something that we could push off to another year. That's my thought on that one. Joe, if I may ask a question regarding, and I was writing while you were talking, so forgive me here, but you said something about we may be able to find a different funding source for certain pieces of this. Would that be the community center enhancements? Could that be?
Sorry, no, what I was trying to say is,
I'm sure it's my fault, but I get it.
no, but if you do not support adding positions or certain positions, that doesn't mean we can't still necessarily accomplish what was envisioned.
I see.
There may be ways, again, under Chapter 4 of the Charter for Town Administrator and Chapter 5, my position requires me to always analyze the organizational structure. So that's what I was trying to get to, more related to positions.
Positions, organizational structure versus funding.
Yep. And if I may, again, under the memo that starts all of this, if you look at the sources and uses table, and I'll look to my colleague to help me correct any mistakes I may state, but if you actually look at that sources and uses, embedded within that is the departmental budgets without enhancement of services. So that 30.6 million number should tie back to the last line of Appendix B. Then there's the add of the 250,000 to administration budget to continue to support childcare stipend. But there is a line that puts in 741,000 and change for enhancements of services. So if you were to do that, and again, this is accurate as of last week, it may have changed somewhat, but as you go down the line there, on the one hand, you are increasing that line item year over year by 8%. You are increasing the expenses organizationally wide, so now not just Article 4, but the entire town operation by just under 6%. However, based on the revenue projections in this report, you still have some money left over. So that would suggest to me that there is some wiggle room, so to speak. However, 741,000 in enhancement of services is halfway to supporting or enhancing Article 39, the project known as Article 39. So I would ask you to look at the sources and uses, I would ask you to follow that table, and then as you keep analyzing.
Michael?
Joe, what percentage is the budget going up without the enhancement of services currently with the newest numbers?
Well, departmental budgets is, rounds out to 3% year over year.
3%.
So I would argue that's within the margin of 2.5% plus new growth.
And then overall, what is the overall?
Then the, and I'll ask the finance director to assist only if I'm misstating, but a nod either way would be helpful. If you look at the sources and uses under expenses, so I was making reference to the headline that says Article 4 items, the first line being the majority of Article 4. I say majority because group health insurance, county retirement, all of that is also factored in. But if you have all of those uses contemplated, that expense line increases year over year by 8%.
The overall budget, though, I believe the number early on was 4.2% or 4.4%.
I think that may be correct, a prior version. Frank, I apologize, I'm trying to make eye contact. No, it's not you, with the finance director.
She's hiding.
I would never suggest that, and thank you, Frank. I think earlier versions, as we go through that, had a lower number. I think you're correct. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Right. So I guess when we get that, and this can be follow-up, because we're obviously going to bring this back next week as well. What does it go up if we approve all these enhancement of services? And I certainly appreciate the actual cost to new positions.
Less than one.
Less than one? Okay. To your, I don't know, Julie, how you want to attack this, but I think, one, that there was a lot of up and down head nods on youth services. So is it fair to say that we'll push that off, have the conversations with Monomoy?
I think so. And then, to Jeff's point, I mean, there's not a current waiting list, and certainly we all acknowledge that she does a ton of work, but if we could hold off for now.
And then, if I may, cemetery, which I'm only touching on the ones you've already touched on. Cemetery seems to me that we should be getting a plan from the town administrator on shared people, which we just did last year upstairs. So would it be consensus of the board to put that one aside?
I think so.
So when you say, when you say cemetery, you're talking a shared cemetery DPW?
No, I'm talking about the 25,000 for the part-time executive assistant.
Right. Okay, yes, I would, support
Right.
that, for sure.
And then, there was one other one we talked about.
I did say rec and youth, but I wasn't suggesting that
No,
we
I know
get-
we haven't had that conversation yet.
We're talking about my ask was for the community center.
Before we go into that, Jeff, just because you brought it up when we started the conversation, if we could go back to the community center, the $52,000. Building enhancements, it's called. Replacing old shades seems to me to be a maintenance item that's just been deferred, and every item in there, including the security cameras, that $52,000, based on what we haven't spent, doesn't seem like a lot of money to me, and seem like upgrades that we absolutely should be doing, and that I don't even refer to them as enhancements of services, so I'd rather see them in some other part of the budget, but I would defer to the town administrator on that.
Before I go to Joe, Don?
Yeah, there was an acknowledgement that we may have more free cash available by the fall. And my border here is pretty distinct, something that has to be taken on as a responsibility every year from here on in is different from a one-off, something that needs to be repaired and fixed and move away from it. So I would agree with you.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. As in the beginning, I mentioned the long-term impact to the town.
Has to be done.
This is not a long-term impact to the town, and I trust our department head to make, as she did very well, make very clear what that building needs to service our town.
Right.
And what a great point Select Board McCaskill made, that it's not an enhancement of service, it's mostly maintenance.
Right.
So I would look to find another place in our budget to source those funds.
We could take a little out of the legal budget, but that'd be a different conversation later.
If I may, based on this discussion, I would add this dollar amount to the expense line
Yeah,
for that department.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say fine, as long as it's recognizing that next year we're not just going up by a percentage on that budget line, expense line. This isn't gonna have to be done every year. So I would look to the facilities director and say,
Yep,
we're gonna negative that amount
I
of money
think
next year.
we have heard that,
All right, sorry.
but procedurally, that's where these would end up. They would go
Yeah.
into the operating budget because they will support programs and/or positions.
So I think we can say that,
So far I have 2 holds and 1 keep.
yeah, well, and so we've said move the 52, the computer just went
Into the budget.
into the budget.
Yes.
And 274,192 on overtime. So,
That's what we want on now?
yeah,
Okay.
because we've hit HR.
I want to go back
Cemetery.
to that as well.
All right, so why don't we just start at the top then? Go to HR.
Okay.
So HR is funny. Last year, we had 11 new positions that we brought to town meeting and got passed. And to your earlier point, we're going to recognize the future costs of those 11 positions now forever. So go ahead.
Sorry, I recall 8.
Oh, was it 8?
I think it was 8.
I'm exaggerating for effect.
Please don't. I'm going to pay for that exaggeration.
Well, I was going to say something, but I was like, oh, he
8 new
seems pretty
positions.
confident. I
Okay.
didn't think it was 11.
Thank you,
I do
thank
think
you.
we need to err on the side of caution, but this HR director, this isn't a new conversation, and this is not something that, in my mind, even belonged in enhancement of services, because this was voted by the board to proceed with prior to the budget even being created. So it's not a new thing that we're contemplating. We heard from a lot of people in the public, and I believe this belongs in a budget, not in an enhancement of services, similar to the positions that we did last year. They were baked into the budget, and the budget got voted, and the positions got passed.
Yeah,
So if it's still the intent of the board to have this position for all the needs that we've talked about in several meetings, then it would be my recommendation to move it into a budget.
Jeff?
I fully support the position, and I'll certainly listen a little more to where it might be found, where it might be placed.
Don?
Sure.
There's no one else.
I was hoping there would be. It's a repeat of my feelings from last year. I mean, there's 2 things going on here. It's like whether we should do it. I totally agree. I'm a big fan of putting it in an article and then folding it into the budget the next year. But it's ultimately going to wind up being in a budget. It has to be. So it's the process that bothers me, but not not the position itself. Unlike last year, we had the discussion, and we had a draft of what it might look like, and we've had a full discussion about, who reports to whom and everything. So this is further along than it was last year.
So I think you
So what
mean that you're okay with putting it in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
That's what I
like I
thought.
said, I reserve the right to continue to champion the idea that we acquire new personnel by putting them in an article one year, and then the next year they show up after the town meeting approves of them into the budget. But that's just me, and it's been proven to be just me.
Well, I mean, again, I think we've talked about this for almost 2 years at this point, so I don't think, it's wrongly placed if it's in the budget. I don't look at it as an enhancement of service either. So can we move that to the budget?
You certainly may. If I may, however, I want to be clear. This is my department budget, so I'm responsible for my enhancement of service narrative.
Enhancement of services?
Well, no, I think the thing I want to put on the record is the administration team has been seeking a human resources generalist, and the board has been talking about generalist or executive. The dollar amount therein is meant to support a generalist, not an executive.
Right. Understood.
Per se.
because- Right, because we don't.
But if the board were agreeable, that the 95,000 would go into the salaries and wages line for administration.
Right.
There is an element of the 30,000 that is fringe, that onboarding for an employee, separate from programming. So there'd be some dollar amount that would go on the expense side as well.
Understood.
It's actually a
But to your
large
question,
number.
yes, this would be encapsulated within Department 149 administration.
Good with that?
So consensus, we all good with that?
With what? Because we just talked about two different
Oh.
flavors.
The generalist and putting it in the budget and the admin budget.
I don't want to trivialize the admin. What are we talking about? 25, 30% generally tacked on to cover those other ancillary costs
The
beyond
fringe,
the straight salary?
the fringe, so to speak, I think it's less than 5,000. So it'd be not contractual items, but items that are found in the personnel bylaws.
But we're not going to wind up with someone that can report to both the town administrator and to the board that way, are we?
We can't do that anyway yet, until the charter is changed.
Okay.
So it has to go that way
But a very,
first.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Very good point by somebody, I don't remember who it was. About the person who's going to be hired for this position, knowing that down the road, they will be reporting to both.
Linda
Vers-
Sabula.
Was that Linda Sabula?
If that's the
It was a great
construct,
point.
that's one,
Was,
that's a
yeah.
good point.
Yeah, it was a great point, and I agree with her wholeheartedly on that, that it's best to let the person we're interviewing know where the position's gonna end up. So I support it 100%.
If this is the camel putting his nose under the tent, then I'm okay with it,
I
because
have no idea what that means.
it means that we're just exploring because we got another destination.
I see. Okay. I thought you called me a camel.
No.
Camel nose intent is a tried and true budget comment.
Okay,
For sure.
all right.
And if I could relate it to that, there's a $30,000 request under expenses, a portion of which would be fringe for the position. Can I set aside 5,000, no more than 5,000 for
Yeah.
that? Thank you.
Seems awful low, though.
You think 5 is low?
Having hired and fired people in my life, yeah. As a carrying cost?
Well,
That's what he
Okay,
recommends.
I'm good with it. I'm just saying it seems low.
Okay.
all right, well, we're not going to let anyone do anything, so.
Is
All
the
right.
board willing to discuss the remainder of the enhancement of service request under administration?
Yeah. Which other, well, we have,
Step increases.
oh, the stepping, yeah, I was just going to bring that up, actually, because he's talking about 5 he thinks is low, but I think 20,000 in step increases, that's fair. No?
So
I think that's a fair.
I heard
right?
fair, I didn't know if there was an "un" before it.
No.
No, I would agree. So again, the concept there is we want to make sure we have funding available when we have staff that outperform.
Right.
And we have that.
Right.
And this is a way to make sure that there's no pressure on the departments that may have the outperformer, so to speak. And to the earlier question, if there's money left over, that could impact upon salaries and wages related to a new position. I still think the 5,000 for onboarding is sufficient for that. But that's the purpose of the 20,000, to bring that line item to 115.
Okay.
And then lastly, the remaining 25,000 for expense is to fund programs that the HR generalist can then roll out. We're thinking more things for employee assistance, onboarding of employees, so things that the generalist would do and funds available to build those programs. $25,000 is where we want to start. We'll be able to gauge in the first year how accurate that is and go from there in future years.
Joe, it says 30 here. 30 or 25?
So we took 5,000
took the
from the 30
5,
for
right,
fringe.
right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I just go down the list. Fire department with the 274, 192 for overtime.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I do not want to make any assumptions. Should I go forward with the enhancement of services for administration as articulated?
Yes.
Thank you.
So now we're on the second one.
Fire department.
Fire department, 274, 192 for overtime. So I think we're going back to, looking at, say, community center as something that should be done as part of building maintenance, and then we have overtime that we really need to budget for appropriately. Michael?
And we have chief and deputy chief here, obviously. Maybe they come up if there's questions, but, the way I read it, it was basically to get to an 8-man min. So it's not necessarily overtime that we've already agreed on that we're trying to put back. I'm struggling with this one, and this, because of last year's conversation. Last year's conversation was full support to get 4 new firefighters, and as mentioned in the hallway, to get to an 8-man min, if that's the request, I would much rather personally have the conversation to add 4 more firefighters, and not at this year's town meeting, and just staff for it. Obviously, the fire department gets the support, and obviously, I believe this board has never not supported the fire department, but we did go to town meeting and tell them that we're gonna hire 4 new firefighters, and we're gonna give back overtime. And to go back to them, this early in the game, without any real data on what it is, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Chief? And deputy?
And I mean that as respectfully as I can say it.
No, I totally agree.
I know what you guys do.
So, Chief LeBlanc, Deputy Thornton, I understand your perspective 100%, and I'm not, this was never a bait and switch. This is what we're slowly starting to realize, is that our operational model of relying on people off duty to come in does not provide the level of coverage that we're satisfied with for the town. It creates a safety issue in my mind for our personnel, and it creates a safety issue for the citizens. Even 2 people showing up on a fire truck is not enough, but it's better than 1. So we got the 8 people, we went through a year, we saw that they definitely have had an impact. They've had an impact on the overtime, they've reduced the overtime. This is to increase that, that staffing, which we already do in the summertime already on weekends, because weekends are during the summer, people have lives, they want to live their lives. So, totally understand where you're coming from. I understand the bigger ask of hiring 4 more people. We didn't want to obviously come forward another year and say, hey, we want to hire 4 more people. I think we're at that balance point where we either hire people or we spend overtime. And that's how this fire department has always operated. It's how this town has always operated. The fringe benefits and that 40% extra cost to hire people has always been a detriment to hiring people, and we've always relied on the overtime to staff the station. It's just the model that we're in right now is slowly starting to break down. And our people, I don't want it to come across like our people aren't doing their job, because they are. And they do it adamantly, day in, day out, getting out of bed 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on their off-duty hours to come in and cover that station. But there's always a window when the station is staffed with 1 person. And that's what we're trying to correct. So, fair point, don't take anything, no offense to it, and this was never a bait and switch. This is just really, a message going forward that we need to fix.
Madam Chair, if I may. Thank you, and definitely no thought that it's a bait and switch in my
no,
mind. It's,
okay.
it's getting from where we are
Yep.
to where we probably should be. And I recognize, and I've mentioned it to both of you, that the overtime is gonna start to dry up with the new generation of employees. We're not gonna have as many. So I think ultimately, if you're, as the chief and deputy chief, saying we need 8 people, then I think that that's something we need to start exploring now for next year. And then I would only ask, as we talk about a fall town meeting, I'm not sure if it's possible, but, and having a little bit more data as far as what you've spent, because you certainly have enough money in what we kept in overtime to get us till a fall town meeting, correct?
Hmm?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is this something that you would be comfortable pushing off till further conversation in the fall, and then maybe start to explore numbers on 4 more firefighters?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna follow the direction of the board. All I can do is advocate for what we think our position is. More people, it's pluses and minuses. As the police department says, it doesn't take us quite as long, but there is a downtime until we get them on board and operating. And the pool of people is a lot smaller right now. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but ultimately, I would tell you as a fire chief, more people is the better solution. Overtime becomes expensive quickly, but there's always a balance, so.
Keep doing a good job poaching people from other towns. No disrespect to other fire chiefs.
No, I understand that. Can't have coffee anywhere anymore without getting a shot, but that's all right.
That was just my comments. Thank you.
Jeff, do you have anything?
Yeah, your department is second to none. I think we're so lucky to have you in this town, all of the entire department. What was your overtime last year as compared to what you're asking for this year? Or a rough percentage. Are you asking for 25% more in this 274 number?
I think if you look at the total, it's about a 30% increase.
It's a 30%.
In the overtime.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that, because I don't have that number at the tip of my fingers.
So just to gain more information, would you attribute that to the number of people that you have that are out and hurt? Would you contribute, what do you contribute that to? More calls, more runs, more?
So that, with a big number, it would include the enhancement of services. So we take that out, it's only about a 4.5% increase in overtime.
Understood.
And that is almost 100% contractual.
Gotcha, okay.
We did increase training hours a little bit for everybody, so that added a little bit to it, but everything else, when we build the fire department overtime budget, we look at actual vacation leave. We use an average of sick time leave over the past 3 years. Personal time leave is a hard number, so we can calculate that down. Emergencies are based on what our percentage increase of runs was over the previous year, and that's a 3-year average we use.
Yeah.
So that's where we figure out the emergency hours, station coverage hours, all of that.
Well, I mean, I sit here completely comfortable with all your procedure and your system and the way you work things out and come to your number. Just trying to square the number, to be honest with you.
So another point of discussion, and I'm really only going to surprise the deputy with this, but where we talked about at the beginning. So we do 8-man or 8 personnel for the weekends in the summer. One of the other things we could talk about is, as a stopgap to get to maybe next year, is we look at doing 8-man all summer, so July 1st until Labor Day, which would be an increase, but not as much of an increase, and I can get that number for the board. That gets us to the fall, when we have the bigger conversation. If the bigger conversation, we don't do that, or if we end up hiring people or whatever we do, we get through the rest of the year running with 7, which is not horrible. It works. It's what we're doing now. So, that might be a stopgap. The summertime is clearly when we're busiest, and it's hardest to get people back. So even just getting people back, Captain Smith lives in, off of 137 in East Harwich. It'll take her 20 minutes to get to headquarters, just because she can't pull out on the 137. So,
It's brutal.
so that's something we can certainly, as a stopgap compromise. At the end of the day, I think we just need to keep pushing the conversation forward, and that's what we do. And I do recognize that it's a big ask of the town, and I'm not unaware of that.
So
Appreciate that.
So if you did the 8-person, because understanding that this amount of money was to get to the, oh, got some numbers for you.
Phone a friend or something like that?
She's the best.
Only gets 2 of those. Damn sure.
So overtime, 101.2%, is that right?
Munis.
Yeah, munis. So,
It was, this is what I see is your budget, because I think we had to do
Yeah.
like a little bit of transfer, so this
yeah,
was
so we're about
3.5.
1.1
1.15 million.
for this
The
year,
actual
yeah,
Was for '23.
yeah,
That was for the full year. We can compare the '24, because we're about halfway.
right.
Is it a safe
Yeah,
to say
no.
50% though, because of the season?
No, it's kind of, it's a moving target, so.
Okay.
So I guess back to what I understood that the 274 was to get to the 8 man.
Yeah,
And hearing you a couple Saturdays ago, I can't even remember what Saturday that was at this point. But I understood it because I can't imagine being that one person in the station and a call comes in. So, you know, I appreciate the effort to do, okay, we'll do 8 in the summer when we're most busy, but what happens if it's the fall and that, you know, so I'm looking at it year-round, because even though the summer is when you need it most, and if you can manage, my only other question would be, if, without that though, and if something happens and for some reason we didn't have a fall town meeting, which I don't anticipate, I believe we'll have one, but where would you be without that money? You'd be back to just 7,
right,
right?
for the remainder of the year. I'm going to tell you as I sit here, notwithstanding everything that I've just said, I would much rather get to a point where we had 8 year-round.
Right.
That, you know, that's my end goal. I think that's, you know, Dennis is a similar sized town. They're a little bit different because they're a north and south town, but basically same square miles, and they're running a 10-person shift out of 2 stations. So I think that, you know, do I see us needing to get to 10? I don't know. I think we could probably safely, if I was telling you long-term, would be 9 would be my magic number, which is probably like an 11 or a 12-person shift with a 9-person minimum. But I also, you know, hiring 8 people or getting to that point is going to take time, and I understand that. And, you know, we went through a couple of bad budget years where we struggled just to get the overtime we needed to run the station. So I'm not trying to be greedy, just trying to you know, do what's best, what I feel is best for the department
Right.
and the town.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go in a way different direction, but it's similar to what Michael was asking about being able to build a case. You got to follow me here because these are different threads, but they all relate to your department. I got corrected last week. We got 11,700? Okay. Voters, and unless we get the Civic Award of the Year, when you take out people who are under 5 years old, who are in schools, that we either have the most registered voters in the entire world, or our top line is probably wrong. You know, the people who really live here. You know, because that's one thing I don't think people have realized, is that we've actually increased in size. It's not really reflecting yet in the census, but it's there, number one. Number two, I'm curious, and I'm sure the public would be curious. You guys, just to be clear, because I don't think everybody understands this, what happens when the insurance reimburses? Where does that go?
General fund.
I know. Having said that, I'd be curious about what the dynamic is, what the trend line for that was, because you're not getting that money. But the runs are probably increasing. That's the third one, you know, what the runs are. The demographics of the town are radically different from when I moved in here 33 years ago. I mean, you probably, what percentage do you think we have over 65 right now? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So, I mean, the potential for infirmities and for people to pick up, like, say, in my house, go up when the population ages out. But those are discussions that you have to kind of fundamentally address so that you can build the case. You can't just say it's 2.7% more than last year, because that's not a meaningful driver of what you should be deploying. Runs are where the reimbursement money is going and how that's going. I suspect that over 20 years is much greater now than it was 20 years ago.
And so I guess what I would say is a couple of things. You know, we're fortunate, even with changing ambulance billing companies, that we still do about a 92% collection rate, 92, 93, something like that. Again, that goes to the general fund, which, you know, a little bit I'm going to say is either here or there, because it's still receipts to the town, which ultimately funds our budget next year. So that's, you know, whether that came directly back to the fire department like it does in other towns or whatever, it's not an issue I want to discuss, because I feel very strongly that we provide an ambulance whether people pay or not, and that's, I've always felt that way. I kind of have a personal bias against billing for the ambulance, but I'm not going to get into that discussion. What I would tell you is a little bit of this conversation, the run volume, I want to say it's insignificant, but a little bit of it's insignificant because 2 ambulance calls at the same time means there's one person by themselves. So that's not whether we have a 10% increase in runs or our community is elderly or needy or we're going to a lot of fires. 2 ambulance calls at the same time means that one person is by themselves, potentially, if we can't get people to come back off duty. So we're just trying to staff really for the bare minimum of call volume. I understand we can't staff for the maximum call volume or for a building fire, which we need everybody and then some. I have a strong, and I've said this multiple times, very strong opinion that the third 911 call should get the exact same level of service as the first one. And we don't do that currently. So that's something that we're trying, you know, that we're trying to work to, that we've identified as a coverage gap that we're trying to get to. All of these are a big conversation, and there's a lot of moving parts to all of it.
And that's kind of what I'm saying, is ultimately what you just said too about the staffing strength and how often you're there with one person now. It was mortifying 20 years ago when we had the failed override, because you were talking about closing down a second house entirely. Now that is a huge part of Harwich, you know, demographically, with people living in it, and it would have been a horrible mistake for us to just pull up the stakes and walk away from that. But the discussion is built and driven by all of the things that I was just discussing. I get that you don't like the insurance, but the fact is you're doing the runs.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And it's a revenue source, unlike other departments, that comes with the territory. You might be able to make the argument, but you can't make the argument in like 45 days, is kind of what Michael's driving at. I'm confident that you can, because you guys are driven by data anyway, I'm confident that you can come up with, you know, the runs, how many times now, because you don't spend percentages, by the way. I don't really care whether it's 95 or 87%. When you pay a bill, you pay bills with money. So, and the bigger the money gets, the changes become a smaller percentage at that point. So that's kind of a fake analysis to just say it's hovering at around that same level, because I doubt that the magnitude of the money that's changing hands is staying at that same level.
And while I agree that, I mean, I would have to know exactly kind of what questions the board would want answered in terms of data, because again, for me, it's very simplistic, but I live it. So I understand that not everybody sees the world through my eyes, but the equation for me is always the same. Station 2 goes out, we don't get any coverage. The headquarters ambulance goes out, nobody comes in for coverage. That person's alone, whether it's August or January, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That metric never really changes. Now, there may be times when we have 8 people on duty, so that person isn't alone, and that's, you know, a coverage. That's about 30% of the time is when we budget to cover. So it's really kind of a simple equation to me of, which is why I think we went for the overtime route versus more people. I think more people is a much bigger conversation because it's a much bigger investment.
Just to complete this conversation, though, at least for my part, you've got a different mix of people that are working for you, like Michael was saying. I mean, it's like you're at the point where you can't necessarily count on them in the same numbers that you could have like 15 years ago to say, we got a problem, come on in. So that's part of the discussion. And the other one that I haven't heard you say anything about, but it's compelling on your part to be able to start talking about that, is you have a metric where you have a target for response time, beyond which you wind up having mortalities. And that's something you really need to bring up too, is like, you can't get the people to come in. You got you're shorting on staff, like you were talking about. What do you do? I mean, you got to be able to move the discussion somewhere, but this is a discussion that's going to take a while for you to be able to put together, and so that people understand that we're not playing games. We didn't hire those people and we're just hiding them somewhere in the back. It's there's a problem in the dynamic in the way we're operating that's changing, and we have to address it, or else it's going to have consequences.
So, I go back to our conversation of where we are on our list and what we're trying to achieve here. And to me, I'm hearing the numbers, that's what I heard a couple weeks ago. I'm looking at the numbers. To me, it's $274,000 to get to that 8-person staffing year-round. And, I would prefer that we're allowing them, because it is a larger conversation and it is a bigger investment, because we're talking about people and the costs of hiring more people. And I'm fully in favor of listening to all of that moving forward. But for now, I would like to know that we've done something by the department that allows them to function at the capacity that they should function at, because if Dawn's calling all the time, I want you to be able to come pick me up.
You must have brought him up for the finger.
For the
You
record, it
definitely
is
drove
not
him
all
for the
my
finger.
fault.
So, I'm making light of it, but it's true. I mean, I don't.
And, yeah, and I appreciate your comments, and again, that's kind of where our bottom line is. We ultimately, Brewster just got a staffing study done, and they need to hire like 8. Orleans just hired 8, although they only hired 5, to my point earlier about getting qualified candidates. They were only able to get 5 so far of their 8. So everybody's looking at it and facing the same reality. We're blessed in this town, and if I sit at that coffee table with the fire chiefs, they ever let me back, which they won't, after we sold our guys. But if I sit at that coffee table, they always go, I don't know how you do it. And I'm not doing it. Craig's not doing it. It's our people are dedicated and are coming back, but that's going to change.
Yep. Jeff?
I'll start. This is not, in my opinion, a want. This is a need for your department. So I would support the 274, 191.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I feel the same way.
I'll start the conversation that way, and let's put this one to bed. One way or the other.
I could go either way at this point. I mean, I liked your compromise and your statement about needing in the summertime, and it was a little bit more of a want-off summertime. So I thought that was a great place for us to end up in a budget cycle that we're trying to find pennies at this point, and not cutting other people, and trying to give that 30% of the tax base that are struggling with inflation a little bit of a break, right? On $80 million, it's not much of a break. That's the other part of the thinking on this. So, and I imagine there's probably a much higher cost to trying to staff with overtime than staff with firefighters, correct? Even with the benefits. So you're paying your guys to come back at, what's the overtime rate?
It's time and a half plus. So right now, we budget at $67 an hour is the middle of the road overtime rate, and it's a 2-hour minimum. Now, they're there for 2 hours most of the time, but.
And I think that's part of my rationale is listening to what he said and trying to cut where we can cut at this point, recognizing that we can come back in the fall. We're almost to summer, so we would be funding the summer, even with half the money. So we're almost to fall. But
Don?
As long as everybody out there knows that this discussion isn't ended, we just finished by giving you this and everything's fine from here on in. Just because that's what Michael was saying, is a longer narrative. And I don't want anybody to think that we've solved everything that's going on and we just move on now. And so you can't ask for more in the future. You got to be able to make the discussion, but in the meantime, we have to be able to do something to make sure that people are safe.
Yeah, and I think we all hear that it's a much bigger conversation and that it needs to be had sooner than later, but for now, this is what you're looking for the fix for the 8. So, I'm in favor of keeping it on there. You're in favor?
we're moving it forward.
Okay,
Need to get that color copier so we can
Thank you
make
very
more
much.
money.
thank you.
Thank you for
Real
being
quick,
Yep.
Joe, the EKG monitors grant, using the old article, we're under capital.
So that's a repurposing for later.
Yep, okay, yep,
We don't have it tonight.
okay. All right, because Megan told us to come tonight for capital about it. So, I don't care, and I certainly don't want to belabor the meeting, so.
Maybe give us the footnotes.
Footnotes, 100%? You want to do it?
Yeah, sure, so.
I'm an idiot. This starts with me being an idiot.
No, so,
Grant cycle got announced late,
Yeah.
and we didn't anticipate it for this year's budget.
so we wrote a grant, Assistance Firefighters Grant for $277,264 to replace the 4 monitors, 1 on each ambulance. So we wrote it because it's a high bar, and the town would need to come up with $13,863 as the 5% match. So the 2022 annual town meeting, we had a mini pumper in there with an assumption that we would get the grant, which would be a 5% match, which was $22,500. We didn't get the grant. It was still put on, and we got the mini pumper, but we got it through the budget process last year. Article 28 still should have, I'd have to refer back to Joe, $22,500, but if we could rewrite that article for the taxpayers to put towards the monitors, if we were able to get the monitors, that's what we requested.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Me too.
Me too.
If I could, before you get to that consensus, I would argue that that's not a fiscal year '25 capital question.
It
Correct?
is. No, it would be. Grant would be awarded probably in July,
If they get the grant.
if we get the grant.
So is that an add to the plan?
Yeah.
Do
That
you,
was-
do you have your forms
They've already been submitted?
in
sir.
triplicate?
Yep, submitted in triplicate.
So I would rather bring that back next week as a.
Yeah.
as
Oh,
a-
yeah, no, that, we was
Yeah,
just giving us
100%.
the overview.
We submitted it, the question the other day was when, because I know you have to go with capital outlay with it, because the plan's got to change. And we were told to show up tonight. That was the answer we got. So that's all we're, just following instructions, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Apologize, everyone.
It's still Monday, right?
I know, it feels like we've been here 3 days. Highway Department, DPW, the 2 cemetery craftsmen, the work and foreman facilities onboarding fringe benefits, so that's a total of $130,517. Where do we want to start here? Michael?
I'd be comfortable looking at the second, not the cemetery craftsman. And overall, I would ask that the town administrator, through the DPW director, look at the structure of the employees over there and how many employees we have that can mow and weed whack. I thought the DPW director made a good argument for Sean Libby and freeing up his time to actually finish that procurement list. Most of the projects, not most, but 20 of the projects on there are related to DPW, a lot of them facility, and Sean's finding himself pulled in too many directions. So I thought he made a compelling case. Certainly 2 enhancement of services at this point. Certainly, they're off the table for me, but I would love to see an org chart, for lack of better words, for the DPW, and then be not pressed to hire somebody else to mow. DPW and cemetery are hand in hand. So either way, it's gonna be somebody with a lawnmower, a weed whacker, and some other lawn equipment. I feel like we already have that.
Yeah. So just to be clear, you're looking to cut it to 1, right?
Looking to cut it to 1.
One,
I'm
right.
looking to see what the position that they want to hire for Sean Libby looks like independently.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
yeah. I'm good with that as well. Dawn, are you good with that? Okay,
So that's to come back with some description and
yeah.
an actual dollar amount for the 1.
Meaning the facilities maintenance ad, not the cemetery craftsman?
Right, the working foreman facilities,
So
yeah.
if I could to that topic, I would just add that there's an existing working foreman position that's vacant.
Oh.
To me, this is the kind of conversation where if I were allowed by the board, I would do an analysis and a potential reorganization.
That's what I asked for.
Yeah, that sounds, I think that makes sense, because if there's
Yep.
a position that's open and not filled, then there's some help if we can fill that. All right, so you'll come back with, next week with that information so we can figure that one out. We already talked about the cemetery. We talked about the.
Down to rec.
Yeah, we are, right? To rec and youth, in the additional position. And I would support this because, I mean, I've been as their liaison to multiple meetings for the rec. And the expansion of programs can't all be done. You know, it's great that Eric's gotten some volunteers and more than he had, but I think you have to go back to the difficulty in running certain programs with just and not just, I shouldn't say just, but with a majority of volunteers. So I think adding another position there at least makes sense to me. I'm just starting that conversation. I guess Jeff's coming back in too, so he's been a part of a lot of these conversations at the rec program as well, so. We're just on rec and youth, Jeff, and I was saying that over the course of the last several months, rec and youth, and you've been at a lot of the meetings as well, and the expansion of programs in terms of being able to do those programs without only relying on, you know, more and more volunteers. And the additional pieces of that, it's not just youth, it's the elderly programs, it's the middle age programs. So I think having another person is important because if you go back to what some of what Eric was saying was that, and some of the complaints were that they weren't getting instructions of volunteers on how to run the programs and that they weren't getting the feedback. But at the same token, if you're trying to get programs up and running and you're giving out information or you're relying on some people having a background, then you're allotting a bunch of time to trying to then get those programs up and running with the volunteers. I think it leads back to why you see the need for another body. But that's the conversation where I'm starting it, so feel free to, Don, Michael, Jeff, make your
Defer to
arguments.
Yeah.
Gonna defer to him now, is that?
No, I go back and forth on this one. A lot of people go through that rec department, especially in the summer. There was a clear pulse from our parents as to what they felt needed to happen. And I didn't take that lightly. I heard them, I respect them. I absolutely, I have two little guys myself. However, I'm not so sure throwing a body at this without a different system is going to make the necessary change for our residents to see a difference. Did that make sense? Okay. I wholeheartedly believe there needs to be a shift, a difference, a change. I just don't know if throwing another body at it is going to be the answer. Another full-time employee is the answer to the issue that's going on in the eyes of the parents and the end user. I mean, it is a customer service-oriented business, whether you want to look at it that way or not, whether it's a municipal or this is customer service. And I do not feel the customer is being well cared for. I'll stop there.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oddly, you and I are coming from this in exactly the same direction because I was thinking myself, it's what do we need to deploy is a different discussion from how to satisfy a need than it is to say, okay, how are we doing that? I'd really be interested in what goes on in Yarmouth, Orleans. I mean, people have brought up Chatham. I had experience with Chatham Rec. How are they doing what they're doing? Brewster. And before you start throwing money at another position, how are they structured and how are they doing what they're doing to see how we can improve what we're doing? So it's a little premature just to throw a body at it without knowing exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish and if there are other ways of doing it.
Michael?
I think personally, this is one I'd like to hold off until the fall. And I would like, you know, to some of the concerns and just throwing a body at it, I've thought that same thing. Certainly, Chatham is going to be a tough one to compare Harwich with based on their amount of employees, their facility. I mean, that's a tough one. There's other better examples. But I'd like to see an overall plan. And to my questions during the budget hearing, what do the current employees do? So all I got read to me in a public meeting and then Saturday was a giant list of all the programs that we offer. And I wouldn't think that 3 employees could do those programs with the 3 that they already have. So I'm not sure who does what. I'm not sure what this body is going to do other than be a new employee. And I would look to management, you know, right after town meeting to put a plan together on what a new body would accomplish. And been in the community center several times and obviously heard from many parents about some of the activities and programs that the space gets booked, but nobody actually goes. So an assessment of what we're doing and how many kids, and I appreciate you can't start a program and then expect it to be full right away or even know what's gonna happen, but I would like to see more, and certainly we did have that blow up with the parents, and they had a pretty clear message. I know you were at the meetings and Jeff was at the meetings, I was not at the meetings. But I'd like to, a little bit more information. So I'd be comfortable holding off on this one till fall. And I'd also say that we just approved an awful lot of extra money onto a budget that I'm hoping that we get to that is still a balanced budget and that we're not talking about doing an override with what we entered back into, and hope that the board, if we get to that point, would at least have a conversation about not going to town meeting with an override. So I would support waiting on this position until fall and asking for a lot more data.
One thing I would just want us to all consider too is, and I'm okay with waiting on it till the fall, but I would just go back to saying that, because being in those meetings in the last couple months, you know, in only 3 months, people were looking for all this change. And from the get-go, the message was, we hear you and we're trying to address your concerns. And then all these programs get added and some volunteers, but then there's feedback on the volunteers. And there's only a certain number of bodies in that department. And one of them is admin, one of them's part-time, one of them's just due to retire, right? And the other large complaint was about summer camp. And why couldn't they start opening up the summer camp signups in January like other towns, like Yarmouth, I don't know about Dennis, but Chatham, et cetera? Well, he doesn't know because he doesn't, A, know how many other younger kids are gonna come back to work in the summer camp, but he also has only the people he's allotted. So if we're looking to expand services, that's the only reason I'd be in favor of this, because there are reasons for it, so. Sharon?
Sharon Flieger. Just a comment on that. I agree with holding off. I think what needs to be done, and I'm looking from the perspective of being a grandparent, all right, and a previous parent, when you look at the position, you almost ought to have that position description. What is that person going to do? Are they going to coordinate the volunteers? Are they going, or overseeing something? In other words, as opposed to being actually active in doing something. It just seems like if you're going to hire somebody, you need to know what you want them to do. And maybe a good place to start would be asking the parents, where do you see things falling short? Where do you need the help? Do you need help with somebody getting information out, that the programs are available? Do you need somebody to help run the programs? Ask the parents of these kids, what do you need help with? What do you think is going to help make this move forward and be productive for the kids? That may give you a place to start.
So I will say that sitting at those meetings, I heard, and program specialist, to my knowledge, and I agree, we need some more information, but the program specialists are the people who are assisting in running the programs.
Okay, so we already have those people.
Well, he's looking for another person. He has 1.5.
Yeah. So then, and then maybe that's then those people have to coordinate out with the volunteers. Find out from the parents where things are falling short, where are things falling down that, the ideas that they had. Because it sounded like when they were here, they had really good ideas. And they all seemed they were willing to participate and help out.
They've been to multiple meetings after that. They've been to the rec. And
Okay.
that's the meetings I'm referring to. They've
All
been
right.
to the rec commission.
All right.
And
all
they've
right.
been there really since they were here in October. They were in November, December, and January.
All right.
And then again, February.
Because I think that's where you're going to get your good information as to what this person should do or to help out with. That's it.
Thank you. And to your point, Sharon, though, the parents have gone above and beyond.
Yeah, I can believe that.
We've met with them, they formed another group. It's an incredible group of parents.
Yeah.
And they have walked the walk. They volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And I give credit where credit's due, and they own all that credit. I will also say that in my information gathering time with other towns, they all run on volunteers. I mean, there's very, very few towns that I could come up with that have plenty of employees for their rec department. To your point about why they don't bring the summer camps out early, Yarmouth, I believe, put theirs out so early that it filled up so fast that everybody's now complaining that there's nowhere for their kids to go, and they're looking for other towns who haven't even opened registration. So as I always say, I say to both my kids, there's two sides to a pancake, right? There's even two sides to a pancake. So this is a complex, multivariable problem that I go back to saying, and I make the point one more time, I think it's a system issue versus we need one more employee issue.
Yeah, it is, what are you going to do with that system?
What are we going to do with the system? How are we going to make this system work more efficiently, more effectively, and enter into the, I'll also add, it's not just somebody to work with the volunteers, okay? Because that's almost that's a half-time job. It's somebody who can free up somebody so that they can input data on the computer. So there's a lot going on at the rec. And those people are doing a lot of work. I'm just not sure the system is
I think they
right.
also had brought up the fact that they were looking for space, like outdoor space for different.
Well, that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
A whole nother animal, but I would support, and I hate to do this, because I would love to have an answer today for the residents, for the parents, but I don't think we have done enough work to figure out exactly what it is we need.
Yeah,
And instead of hiring a full-time employee and then figuring out that the system's still broken, I'd rather find out
How to fix the system.
how to fix the system.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
John, did you already talk on these?
Well, one more. Is this something we can bring back next week? If we can get more information in a week's time, is this something that we can bring back and
Well,
have a?
I think we really just need to make some decisions so that, to Michael's point.
No,
that- I think that the consensus is to bring it back for the fall. That's what I'm hearing.
Unless there's a way to gather the information, I guess there is
It's an awful lot of work.
awful lot of work.
Yeah.
Which this board member is a little frustrated that we didn't start this several months ago when the parents came with their concerns. That's now the horse is
It still
left
would have
the
been a
barn.
budget item.
I understand. We'd have more information, though. I think that's my point. At this point, we'd have more information to
Yeah,
make
I
a
seriously.
better educated decision on what to do here.
Madam Chair, if I could, before you
Yeah.
move off from that, 600 of the 850 under expenses was for a copier. Is there any thought on that?
Oh,
$600?
$600?
If you look at the full ask for recreation and youth, there's the salary item of the position you just discussed, $250 for onboarding, but there was also a request for $600 for a copier.
I think we can handle the copy.
Deal with the copier.
I had to ask.
Nice.
Take that out of Carolyn's budget.
It's not recognized as a funding source.
All right, so we got through all those. And now,
Madam Chair, under new business item A, there are 3 originals. When you accept the warrant that the clerk has presented to you, we'd ask that all 3 be signed completely by the board members. The rest I would turn over to our clerk, but
Madam Chair, if I
warrant.
may.
yeah, please.
I move that we approve and sign the special town election warrant to be held on April 9th, 2024.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve a new 2024 annual common viculars license for Cape Chill Partners LLC DBA Dairy Queen Grill and Chill, 443 Route 28.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
You want to take over, Jeff?
Thanks,
Tomorrow.
Michael. Appreciate
Just
that.
you were taking your time, so I just wanted to get it.
Couldn't get in there with a crowbar. I move that we vote to send a letter of support for the fiscal year 2024 housing rehab program.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Joe. Howard Accessibility Rights Committee charge discussion. And I'm going to say that on this one, we've talked about HARC, and so that's why I put it back on the agenda. I know, Michael, you've been involved, and Don, and we went at one point, when Larry was still on the board, to expand to 7 to help them, but then ultimately went back to 5 because they didn't have enough people attending. And then we had a few resignations. So I'll go to you, Don, because you're the liaison, and
Well, basically, I was deferring originally to Michael, and I still am, in the sense that there's 2 things going on here. First of all, we shot ourselves in the foot by changing the numbers on the committee. You know, we said it at the time, it's going to be harder to get a quorum, so, but Michael's brought this up before. It's true. The original function of HARC really boiled down, and in all deference to the discussion earlier, it boiled down to municipal facilities, because they have no real jurisdiction over somebody building apartments here and telling them what they're supposed to be doing. I had interviewed somebody with Jeff, and it was almost like an epiphany. It's that if you want to know whether there's a possibility of recasting this into something away from physically addressing stuff, because Sean Libby's got a punch list. I mean, he knows exactly what we own that isn't complying with ADA. So that's not a road we're going down again. But I know Carla Burke does this within the Vital program of the library, you know, visually, but the woman that we interviewed had an audible challenge. There are potential possibilities to address, and there are real possibilities to address how we operate and how we accommodate everybody physically. And I'd be in on that being the charge, but finding a job to do with the physical layout of everything, they don't, as a committee, have that jurisdiction to go to, say, Stop and Shop and say, I want you to do this or that, because that's not what it was set up to do, and it really has no enforcement powers. So if we've moved past identifying the properties that need to be upgraded, and I believe, I mean, Michael's father was on that. I'm pretty sure that that was part of the discussion. It's like, it's not that there was nothing left to do, but that particular aspect of what we were asking to do has been completed. I could agree to morphing into a higher purpose for something like visual, audible, and other types of infirmities, you know, for town meeting and town organizations that hold meetings. You know, how do we accommodate people? And what are we doing that's falling short? I could get behind that. It's not for lack of caring about it. I mean, certainly, I mean, I worry about that too, but I worry also about a volunteer committee not understanding that they don't have the impact on like private developers building stuff, they could certainly weigh in as a bully pulpit, but that's not something that even we can do, never mind the people that we appoint as volunteers. So I'll throw it back to everybody, but I mean, I see a purpose that could be filled, but not so much in physical environs that the town owns.
Okay.
I'm going to defer to Jeff.
Jeff?
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Lynn, for coming tonight. After our last two meetings, where I had my narrative, when we had received 2 resignations, my narrative basically stated I wanted people, before they resign, to have a conversation. Well, a pleasant result came from my narrative. And I had a meeting today for about an hour with Donna Richardson, who I think is one of my new friends. She's an amazing person. And not only did she get an opportunity to tell me her feelings, but it was the opportunity that I asked for, which was for us to find out where we fall down. And we're not, the narrative is we're not supportive, we don't give direction. And Donna made it very clear what that committee needed. And I'll go to the committee handbook. I think Lynn brought it up, is that HARC is not even mentioned in the committee handbook. I read the committee handbook today twice, just to make sure that I understood it. And while I will say it's a nice piece of something to give to the committee members when they get on board, it really has no practical application. It doesn't give the committee members a real understanding of exactly how the process, procedure, and the system, I go back to the word system, is supposed to work. I also found out the chair and the liaisons need to do a better job of connecting monthly. And I made it clear to Donna as well that the goal of a liaison with any committee is to not go and drive the agenda, not go and suggest things for the committee to do. That's for them to go out and identify the needs of the community and then have an agenda and a meeting, and then bring it back, bring any recommendations as they are an advisory committee to the select board, to the select board. The select board will then take a vote and figure out which way we want to go with their advisement. But I go back to what really was eye-opening is, for Donna, is that the committees, all of our committees, it's a vehicle for the public, if they have a problem, to voice their concern and their opinion. It doesn't always necessarily have to be at the select board level. I'll finish by saying HARC's work is never done. Never done. It's ongoing. It has to take care of a specific population of our town. And that population deserves the right to have free and simple accessibility to every town municipal building that we have. And I have this that I was given today. And talk about a punch list. There's, maybe this is what you were referring to. There's 50 pages, and everything in blue is completed. Everything in white is not. So where it fell down with Donna is that the committee did not have a clear understanding of what to do when they had an agenda item. She said point blank to me, where do we go with the information? Wait, give me that back.
He takes documents all the time.
No, I got to give it back. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to do. They said they've reached out. Nobody got back to them. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. Our volunteers are important. We're volunteers, and we need to treat them better. And I maybe have Donna coming back. I hope. I've asked her 5 times. And, you know, HARC's work is never done, my opinion. Thank you.
If Donna comes back, what does that put them at?
Well, what happened with the nice woman that we interviewed with the auditory issue?
We've deferred that. Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
All right, Jeff.
Took up too much time for you, Michael? Apologize.
Don and I, as the interview committee, voted to defer that appointment until we got to this point.
This conversation.
Because there's no sense putting a committee back together without a clear focus. And I think to your point, Jeff, and to this list, the list is done. Committees don't go around and hang up signs. Committees don't go around and
That's right.
paint lines. Committees don't do any of that. So this list existed prior to the last committee that we put in place, and it falls under DPW now, 90% of that work. And as we all talked about tonight, and Sean Libby, who most of that would fall on, is so overwhelmed with procurement process that we're talking about getting them some help. So it's not that they weren't heard, and to the comments of the nice lady that's here tonight, and some of the comments she was referring to, I believe, were back to me. My father was on that committee, and he would say it was a complete waste of time because everything that was in the charge was done. And for me, if we're gonna have a committee, the committee has to have a real purpose. They have to understand that they don't interact with town employees. They have to understand that the process is the process, but without a clear charge and something to do, I stand by my statements that it's been a waste of time for them. Because one thing that he said, and the past chair said, and one other person that resigned said, is they were talking in circles, and then the latest conversations that they had were talking about redoing the work that had already been done. So it's incumbent upon this board to put a charge together with clear direction. Because the other part of this is we have employees that this takes up an exorbitant amount of their time. So, and staff. And so without coming up with a charge, and there is a charge. I've heard twice that there was no charge. There's a charge. It's not in the committee handbook. But Larry Ballantyne and Megan Eldridge wrote the last charge, and the chair was very familiar with the charge, because when she met with me, she outlined everything that had been done and the need for more to do if the town needs it. But no matter what we put together for a committee, they have to understand that they're an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen. And before we go ahead and populate that committee, we ought to make sure that it makes sense to. And we're not just doing something because we feel like we need to, because a few people want to do it. And I agree with you, Jeff.
Well,
Hark never ends. My father's handicapped. My grandmother was in a wheelchair from the time that he was 5 years old. I know all about it. Many, many, many people that I would like to support, but without giving them clear direction, what's the point?
Jeff?
I was very long-winded, but anyway, I will say.
Trying to catch up to you.
I will say, I agree with you 100%. There needs to be a clear charge. And then there needs to be a discussion when the committee reforms about the expectations of how things are going to move forward. And some committees meet 6, 7 times a year. That might be all this committee needs to do. But as long as we're all on the same page and we're all understanding the expectations that are being put forward, this is a committee that I believe Harwich should have, without exception.
Well, Don?
This isn't a defense as much as a declarative statement. We need to be able, as a board, to be able to articulate what it is we're asking him to do before, I'd be willing to take a shot at writing the charge, but
So moved.
but what am I doing? Unless I know what it is our objective is. And one fundamental thing is, again, we shot ourselves in the foot by going up to 7 people. It is not something that you want to do unless you're damn sure that you're going to wind up hitting a quorum every time. We got sold on that being an answer to something, and it wasn't. It actually only raised the ante. So
Larry did a better job recruiting.
Yeah.
May I? May I?
Yes.
So Don, my answer to that would be, and I hear what you're saying and respect it, but no different than I did with the treasure chest, with FinCom, which didn't go anywhere, and with the golf committee, take the existing charge, rewrite it, make a draft, present it to the select board. I mean, that's the next step for us to getting this committee back on track. And it sits with you to rewrite the charge, and then we can all weigh in and, you know, give you what we think. But that woman that we interviewed was an all-star, and she would be very helpful and very valuable to this town. as well as Donna, as well as Lynn, and all the other ones who are willing to give their time.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking, do you see this morphing into impediments for people who have accessibility issues, so like audio,
The
audible?
perfect example is what that lady said at the interview was, I went to the library and there were things I couldn't do because I couldn't hear. So it was an equipment issue. Well, that should be an agenda item. That should be talked about at their level and then brought to the select board with their advisor.
I'm just looking for the future. That's what I'm saying, is
Well,
if
I-
you see this happening in that direction, you and I talked about this. I would love to be able to do that,
Maybe
but
you
that's
can
not the
meet-
current charge.
Well, maybe you can meet with the committee right now and ask them what they think.
Well, that was going to be my next point, was why don't you take a stab at the charge and look at what they've done in the past and where they could go in terms of, like Jeff's bringing up that example that the woman gave, right? So look at those municipal buildings, look at what hasn't been addressed, and then you can add, like you're pointing out, other disabilities, right? I mean, I think that makes sense, because you can expand what their scope was if they've already achieved certain elements of the list that I think is a couple years of stuff that was done.
And just to that point, any board member that wants to email Dawn their thoughts.
Sure.
And then Dawn has the resource of Megan Eldridge that was very involved.
Right.
Bring Megan into the loop, but I will email you my thoughts.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
past committee
absolutely.
members' thoughts to get you going.
Yep.
All right, so that's the direction we're going in for HARC. Contracts. Or can I just get a motion?
Yep.
I move that we approve the contract with Robert H. Lord Company in the amount of $84,588 for the replacement of the bleachers at the community center.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Town administrators report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So to go back to earlier comments, as the board members know, you've received some inquiries over the past several weeks that the chair had directed me to investigate regarding mooring service agents and the process therein. So you'll see the report that I had directed the harbor master to commission from my understanding. Harbor master and I met when I received this memo. Next steps would be for me to reach out to, I think, the principal of the prior firm to update them on some of the allegations that were made against the town. Given the hour, I can go as in-depth or as superficial as the board would ask at this time.
Well, I think an overview of what John had indicated.
So I know that there has been reference made to what has been referred to as a technicality. So what we're talking about are mooring service agent agreements that are the purview of the select board, ultimately through the harbor master. And so that process is a Chapter 30B process where the town is seeking respondents to a request for proposals and then evaluating through staff and then making recommendations to the board. So I believe, as you know, the board, the select board voted on November 27th, 2023, on the recommendation of the harbor master to approve 3 mooring service agent agreements. One of them was a new provider, I believe a new provider, who responded to the request for proposal. The incumbent, so-called, did not respond in a timely manner. So, you know, the law is clear, certainly as it relates to me as chief procurement officer, and it would be the same for the select board in this instance. The law does not speak to whether it's 0.8 of a second late, 8 days late, 8 weeks late. Late is non-compliant, is non-responsive. So whatever we may think of the prior incumbent, the harbor master certainly cannot rely upon that, and the board, select board, could potentially be inviting hazard if you were to dispute the process. So in my opinion and in my reference to the board, as much as some may want to, we cannot simply chalk this up to a technicality. It is what is considered under the law as a non-responsive response.
Thank you, Joe. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get what you said, but I go back to when this actually all started. These are license agreements as opposed to just flat-out contracts. It went through an IG process with the state for almost a year. In part, that discussion had to do with reasonableness of the services provided, because there was one person who was providing them in Nantucket Sound, in one of the mooring fields, that was exorbitant. So it was precisely because of that that we had to change the process to make it acceptable to the state. My concern here isn't the lateness, but when you're making an award, it's a responsible, responsive bidder, but you're also making the intrinsic judgment that it's a fair and reasonable price. And I'm not sure that I would, knowing what I know now as compared to what we were presented with at the time, I'm not sure that tripling the price is actually fair and reasonable. So, again, it's not a contract in the set in stone invitation for bid kind of contract. It's a license agreement, and we probably should have at least ascertained what the going rate was before we entered into the agreement. I did forward you.
I read it.
Yeah, the one thing from the harbor master, the former one. We both went through that at that time, and it was really difficult to get out of, but we came up with what we thought was a reasonable process, and the state bought it. But it still boils down to, it's a service that they're, for want of a better word, trapped into using depending on what mooring field it is. So it's incumbent upon us to actually make that third determination, not just responsible and responsive, but is this a fair and reasonable price? And I'm not sure we've done that.
Michael?
Joe, the document that you referred to, do we have that document? The one you were reading off of with the information?
It was my understanding it should be in TA's report, in the packet.
Yeah, it's all the way down.
Is it all the way down?
Yeah, you want.
Okay. No, I don't need it right this second. My direction's a little different than Don's, and Frank, thank you for getting up and speaking as a resident with your opinion. And to Chip, thank you for your years of service to the town. I don't want that to get lost, certainly not on this board member, that what you have done for the town. I am at this moment, I am with the town administrator and the harbor master, because we have a procurement process. And I couldn't imagine, with the amount of procurements that we do as a town, being able to say, oops, it was late, don't worry about it, we'll look at it anyway. And I really think that's a very bad precedent to set, to then start making excuses as to, and limiting or letting people be 5 days late, 7 days late, 9 days late. It will be a complete disaster if this board starts taking up procurements about things that come up after the fact. As far as the 3 times the rate, that's been mentioned to me more than once, and I do know the harbor master was going through the exercise of demonstrating, and I imagine, Joe, that's part of your comment about having conversation with the harbor master.
Correct.
That rate studies are being done by the harbor master on other, and the preliminary stuff that I've seen, which rate in this, if it was actually an exorbitant amount of rate done, certainly would matter to me. But I didn't get that sense from the little bit of information that I looked at from surrounding towns. Caveat on that is, I did mention to the harbor master, and I did mention it every year that we voted Chip's contract, and sorry for referring to you by first name, because the acronym of the business is escaping me right now. I did mention to the harbor master and publicly that I don't think a single source for mooring is a service to the customer. And I do believe that the town of Harwich should explore, and I do believe it would be a management, a harbor management plan change, which would require public hearings. But I don't think that we should be allowing the Eversource situation to happen in this town, where our residents only have one choice on moorings. So unrelated to this and for future discussion, I think we should explore how it would be a more fair process to the residents of town, and they have a decision to make on who does their mooring work. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Michael. Jeff?
I would just echo the same sentiments. Thank you both for being here. I certainly sympathize with the position that you're in, but with a date certain time, and as the town administrator made it very clear, late is late, and there is no way in my mind I could vote to do anything different based on the precedent that would set going forward with every other procurement that we outsource, so.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And I feel the same way, and I, again, thank both of you for coming and Frank, for you speaking. But, you know, there is a process. It's a legal process. We're bound to it, and we can't make excuses. If something's late, it's late, and we can't change that process. So I would agree with the harbor master and with the town administrator that we have to adhere to that process. Don?
Just for the future, as what Michael was saying is something I'd be really interested in. We were the unfortunate first case for the IG and the mooring fields. I think Mr. McCaskill and I have talked briefly on this subject, that some of the other people who followed us seem to have had a little bit broader authorities than what we chose. And it hasn't been revisited since back in the early 2000s. Might want to look at what other people have been allowed by the state to do, because I keep saying the state because they own the sand under the water. I mean, and they get to determine, what's going on here. We don't own that area. And I'd be interested in seeing that as a future homework assignment, to see what it's like to have multiple mooring agents.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Thank you, Don.
That concludes my report.
Thank you.
I think he wants to
Select Board, what?
I think he's got his hand up.
Okay.
May I speak?
Sure.
Michael McCaskill. My name's Chip Niehoff, Carl Niehoff. My company is AGL Mooring.
I just lost the acronym. I knew your name.
Sure, thank you. Perfect is the enemy of good. Don Howe. I just heard that about 30 minutes ago. 15 years I've been performing exemplary service to mooring permit holders in the town of Harwich. I don't know what perfect is, but exemplary is pretty close to that. Listening to this discussion tonight, I've heard customer service is extremely important. How do you quantify this? How do you qualify it? Joe Powers just mentioned $600 expenditure for copies or copier. You guys had a chuckle about that, but he said it's important. It's an expense. You should take that. You got to take expenses and costs are very material. AGL has provided extremely low-cost services to mooring holders at costs that are far less than $600. Looking at fees at another qualified mooring servicer, their fees are 200 to 300%. This is what's posted. I guess, is that important? RFP, what does that stand for?
Request for proposal.
Request for proposal. In the application for the mooring servicer, nowhere does that say that there is an RFP, request for proposal, anywhere in that application. There's also no mention of a due date in that application. So maybe it isn't an RFP. That also could answer some other, okay. I've looked at all the other RFPs that the town is advertising on the Harwich website, and every one has a due date. The application did not. So maybe it was an RFP. So looking at customer service, I believe the select board should look at should take this into consideration and should have a discussion about it. I'm not asking this, not of myself, but of the mooring holders for the town of Harwich. This is for them. I also would just add, at this present time, there has been no damages to either parties, Lower Cape Marine Services or myself. Going forward, there could be damages. So, again, you have to ask yourself what's in the best interest of the permit holders of moorings in the town of Harwich. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board report. Michael? Jeff?
I have nothing.
Tom? And me.
You're one.
I have nothing.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I feel like I forgot to say something about it.
Do you have all three? Yep.